Okay, I got the red smoke.
Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
It's, the whole thing is, well, for one, I never thought in a million years that I would do anything like this. So the whole thing has been a journey that I have no explanation for whatsoever. So, how has your week been?
It's been the most insane week of my life, as you can imagine. You know, went from just a normal dude, police officer, jiu-jitsu guy, 1,000 followers on Instagram, mostly people that I've known or been in the military with. And now I'm at like almost 70 and just getting bombarded by everybody, news outlets, podcasters. Like it's seriously insane that 8 minutes of just speaking my heart has completely changed my life.
How long did it take from when you posted that video until you really noticed that you were on an on-ramp that was, I would probably describe it, it feels like it's uncontrollable at this point?
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like I posted it May 5th that night. And by the next morning, you know, it was at a few thousand, which for just a normal dude, like wow, this is gaining some traction.
Yeah, it's a magnitude of order greater than what you're used to for sure.
And a couple hours later, like I said in my video, my work called me and they're like, hey, Greg, this thing's at 400,000 views. It's time to pull the plug. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, this is everybody that's seeing it is sharing it. And just on Facebook alone, it's at like 13 million views and 400,000 shares. And not to mention like every other, you know, it's been ripped and put on YouTube and Twitter, and I don't even have accounts with those things. So
yeah, it's, you know, the digital ecosystem is weird. Once you hit post, whether you own, in air quotes, the material or not, your ownership of that is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the smoke was coming out of the space shuttle rocket for you on that one, and at some point it left an orbit that you had control of.
And it's funny too, because my work even said that. They're like, listen, there's no pulling your message back. We understand that. That is out there in the world of the interwebs. But just taking it down shows that you're in compliance with our policy and our request.
Just you taking it down
just
as
me
that individual.
taking it down. That's what they said they needed to see from me. And I was like, I can't, you know.
I like we were talking on the way here, I think one of the things I love about the podcasting format is that we have 45 hours on this SD card, which I'm going to be honest, let's not fill up the whole 45 hours because I'm going to like need to go to the bathroom. We're going to have to get some food, but it's a long form medium. And what resonated with me with your video was you talking about the gap in trust between law enforcement and the civilian populace. And I think that's huge. I want to talk about whatever you want to, and I definitely want to talk about that, but I think we should start even long before this began and give some people some understanding or context of just who you are and how you arrived as the officer in that car. I'm assuming you made it in your patrol car.
I did.
That's what it looked like, making that video. So let's go to the Wayback Machine.
All right. So, I mean, I've put some of this stuff out there, but we can go through it again. Right out of high school, I was like most young wild men that had no idea what I wanted to fucking do.
Where'd you go to high school?
Snohomish, Washington, so it's just north of Seattle.
Okay.
And, you know, it's funny because people thought, oh, he's going into the military, he must be a patriot, and he must love his country. And it's like, that stuff developed through the process, but initially, I hated school, I liked partying, and I didn't feel like going to college.
So I would say you were a typical / average 18-year-old young man.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, and it's funny too, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the hardest route that I can take. I want to do the hardest thing that I can do for this 4-year enlistment. And I don't even know where I looked into it or heard about it, but I was like, Navy SEAL or Army Ranger. That's it. I'm going to do one of those two things. And so it's funny, like, my whole career got based off of meeting 2 recruiters. And I went
This is such a common narrative too. Unless you have lived, like if you've gone the military route, as soon as you said that, people are like, oh, I know where he's going with this. And everybody else is like, oh, interesting. How does this happen?
Yeah. So I went into the Navy recruiting office first.
That's not a good call.
And like every other person that walks through their door says they want to be a Navy SEAL. And
then you talk to somebody who had no idea what a SEAL
Exactly.
actually is.
Never-
They had no information to give you.
Yep. And he was just a goon too. And he was super pushy. He was like, well, let's sit you down right now and have you take this practice ASVAB. I want to see where you're at. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I took that. And then he's like, all right, I want to schedule you your date for MEPS. And I was like, listen, bro, I'm just trying to figure this out, And then I went right next door to the Army recruiter and said, hey, I'm interested in being an Army Ranger. And the dude was just chill, kicked back. And I just connected with that dude better. And I was like, you know what? Army guys are cool. I'm going to go to the Army. And it's like it could have just as easily went the other way.
As you were telling this and you said you went right next door, I was thinking back to the Navy. So I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, which is pretty far to the left. And joining the military there it's not atypical, but it's probably not the normal path. And I remember going to the Navy recruiter, and right next door was the Army recruiter as well. I wonder if there's some strategy there where they're like, it's like, we get a cheaper lease, but also we'll just be right over here for when you guys piss each other off.
Yeah.
They can just make this little turn and be like, hey, what do you guys have to offer? And it's like, hey, man, whatever you want. What do you want to do?
So that was in 99. I went through, I signed up. I didn't get a Ranger contract because they said they were all out, like they always say. And I was too dumb to fight for it at the time. And luckily it worked out for me. But I went to boot camp down at Fort Benning, Airborne School. And then when I was at Airborne School, a guy from Ranger Regiment came down and said, hey, who would like to try out and go through the Ranger Indoc program? So I was like, yep, that's what I was waiting for. So I raised my hand, and right there on the spot, they take you on a death run. They're like, fall out to the rear of the formation. All right, right face, and just run you to the dirt.
That's going to shock a few people,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And it's funny, too, because I found out later on, some guys had told me, they're like, they send the fastest dude from
Of
regiment
course they do.
to pick up the new Rangers. So every guy falls out,
Yep.
That's your first 5 minutes in going into the RIP program. But yeah, it was peacetime Army still. So it was, I went through RIP and then went up to 2nd Ranger Battalion out of Fort Lewis, Washington. And then they send you to Ranger School once you've been with the regiment for, a period of time, and they realize that you're a good dude. We want to keep you, and we want you to promote. So in the Ranger Regiment, you can't promote unless you have a Ranger tab. And so they send you. I went to Ranger School, and then the craziest thing happened. It was my last day of Ranger School. And are you familiar with how Ranger School is structured, how it works?
I know that there's 3 phases. I know, my understanding is that it's a leadership course. It's broken down into 3 phases. It's heavy on physical exertion, land nav. I know one of them is jungle, right? Is another one, swamp. I don't know if there's much of a difference between a swamp and a jungle, but
yeah. So they have Darby, which is at Fort Benning. That's your first phase. Then
Okay.
Mountains, which is in Dahlonega, Georgia. And then you go down to Eglin Air Force Base for your swamp phase.
you get your swamp on.
Yeah, down in Florida. So I went through that and was doing pretty well. And on the last day, and I, like you said, it's a leadership course. So everything is graded, and if you pass your patrols, then you're going to graduate Ranger School. And I'd passed all my patrols already, so I knew I was good. And on the last day of Ranger School, you rig up and you put your parachutes on down in Eglin Air Force Base. You jump back into Benning, turn your gear in, and you graduate.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we were on the tarmac, all rigged up, ready to get on the plane to jump. And the cadre came out, and they're like, hey, guys, everyone de-rig right now. Come into the auditorium. We got to talk about something.
Was this the month of September?
Yeah, it was. You were correct.
Yeah, okay.
And so it was 9/11, and
Fuck.
we've been so isolated from the world for the last 60 to however many days, depending on, some guys do the extended tour at Ranger School.
Yeah. There's people who've been at Buds for a good 24 months solid.
Yeah, same thing.
They know all the instructors. Like, what's up, Bob? I'm like, isn't that kid a student?
Yeah, so we got a few of them. But so we knew right there. It's like your first contact with the real world after months is like, oh, we're fucking going to war.
Yeah.
And you know it. And it's exciting because, I mean, you know how it is. Everyone in the special ops community, you train, and you want to go and you want to fucking meet the enemy on the field of battle. That's what we do. And a lot of people think that's weird when I say that, but it's like, what person would want to dedicate years to a certain skill and never get to use it?
Yep.
You know?
I think a lot about this. especially in the modern generations where there is an actual real world test. You know, the chessboard of your enemy, it's no longer hypothetical. It's legitimate, and you're going to get tested. And I think about the generations before mine, like everybody who put me through buds, people that I put up on this pedestal. I'm like, oh my God, like I want to be this guy. Those people never saw a single ounce of combat because they didn't get chance. You know, chance didn't throw them the opportunity. I'd have to imagine to some level that's frustrating. But I also think, and I talk with younger guys about this when they ask, I'm like, be very careful judging yourself and your career based off only your combat experience. Because
very true.
The people who put me through training, I still aspire to be like them. And like I said, they saw no combat. So if your only metric is, oh, that guy didn't see any combat, I'm like, yeah, but neither did 3 generation of team guys either. So let's be very careful.
Well, and
the litmus test.
It's all luck of the draw. That's all combat is. I mean, how you react and how you perform, obviously that's based on who you are and your skill set and your connection with your team. But where you end up and when, it's just luck of the draw, you know? And like in the Ranger Regiment, when I was a private, there was, you know, the Rangers had seen combat in Panama and Grenada and Somalia, but just real brief little pockets of combat here and there.
Same with the SEAL community. There was... and the numbers got smaller. But, you know, Somalia, there was 4 SEALs. When I say smaller, I mean like maybe 2 platoons in Panama and Grenada, which is, you know, 30-some guys down to 4. And after that, that was the combat experience, the real-world experience that was being passed forward.
And it's funny because all those guys that were deployed to those theaters were like gods walking around.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, dude, do you know what First Sergeant Kennedy saw? Like, he was in Panama. And it's like, I mean, not to take anything away from that now, but now literally every single person in the Ranger Regiment has multiple combat deployments. It's just a different military. You know?
Optic is shifted. I remember I was like 19 years old checking into SEAL Team 5, and then one of the guys there had served in Somalia, and he was in his khakis, arguably one of the most atrocious military uniforms known to man, and he had a BV. I was like, oh my God. I'd never seen one. I had heard of this, but he was walking across the grinder one day, and I'm just like, he might as well have been Moses parting the Red Sea. It was just unbelievable. And now you go to even the conventional SEAL teams, and it's like, Silver Star. I don't know how many BVs you have because I don't understand the things you have on. It's unbelievable the difference in optics.
Yeah. So. Yeah, back to graduating Ranger School, I was deployed to the Middle East like less than a month later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so 3rd Ranger Battalion and 2nd Ranger Battalion, it was all of 3rd Ranger Battalion and Alpha Company 2nd Ranger Battalion were going to invade Afghanistan on October 19th, 2001. It was my 21st birthday.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and so we're going to jump in and seize, it was called Objective Rhino, a small airfield. And then once we seized that airfield, the Marines were going to land, and then they were going to convoy up to Kandahar and seize the big Kandahar airfield.
CAF.
And literally hours before the mission, we got word. They said, hey, the objective is not a regimental plus size objective, and we're cutting 2nd Battalion, and 3rd Battalion is going to take it on their own. Literally one of the worst moments of your Ranger career, because it's like, even though they didn't meet resistance and kill a bunch of dudes and get to mix it up, the historical context of that, like being able to say I invaded Afghanistan on my 21st birthday.
Yeah. I'm sure there was no animosity though between 2nd and 3rd. Like, I'm sure it was totally fine. There was no good-natured or perhaps bad-natured living.
Well, luckily for us, 3rd Ranger Battalion was in Qatar.
Okay.
And 2nd Battalion was in Amman, Jordan. So we were going to launch from different areas and then jump on the airfield. So we didn't have to hear any of the bullshit.
You had to rib remotely.
And watch them fly away. You know, that didn't happen. But
try not to make eye contact as they're walking out to the airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
Slowly go over and like start pulling pins on parachute. Like, no, it's fine.
Man, those guys all got mustard stains and just got to be part of something pretty awesome. But yeah, after that, you know, I ended up deploying twice to Afghanistan with the Ranger Regiment. And again, it was funny. Like our first one, I was QRF. And I mean, you know how QRF goes. You just sit on the airfield with your kit waiting for fucked up shit to happen. And sometimes it does, you know.
That was your whole tasking?
That was my whole time in Kandahar. just QRF.
What
So
year was that?
That was '02, I believe. So we were just
That's tough.
reading books and
Yeah.
working out and going to downed aircrafts and shit like that. But it was a long, boring deployment because it's like you want to be doing DA stuff, you know?
Especially when other people are out there doing
Exactly,
DA
you know?
stuff. Yeah.
And so then our next deployment, we got to do safe house operations out of a village called Berry Cout, which is north of Asadabad,
Yep.
way out in the middle on the Paki border. And that was a cool deployment. And again, it wasn't much combat. It was, I didn't fire my weapon that deployment.
Yeah.
And people think that's crazy because it was a 6-month deployment. But Afghanistan was just a different culture than what I ended up seeing in Iraq. Like the people there, the overwhelming majority supported the mission. They were happy to see us, and it was more about just like setting in OPs and gathering intel than like kicking doors. And again,
What time of year was it?
we got there in January, and we're there until I believe it was June.
Yeah, because the winter months, especially up in the Northeast, ABAD, JBAD,
Yeah.
Konar, all that stuff. Like, you're not
Yeah.
walking around in. You need a tauntaun, whatever those things are in Star Wars.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, and people don't understand. I can totally empathize with what you're saying because just because you go on deployment doesn't mean you're actually, like, again, it goes back to chance or luck, to however you want to view it, or bad luck,
Yep.
depending on how you would want to view it. But, not all SEALs see combat. Not all SEALs that go on deployment fire their weapon. Not all SEALs in a firefight have the opportunity to align their sights with anything, to include a shadow or a bush,
yeah,
and shoot their gun. There's so many things that happen, and then you hit Afghanistan in the winter months when the fighting lulls, and you may bring the whole Harry Potter series because you're going to have plenty of time to rip through it, or whatever you're into, Game of Thrones or Band of Brothers or all of those things, actually.
yeah. It's so funny, man, because everybody thinks like deployments are just go, 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 and sometimes they are, but a lot of times you're not doing shit.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I didn't see, other than some IEDs and some indirect and stuff, Afghanistan was pretty slow. And I ended up getting out of the Ranger Regiment and going right into the contracting world. And I don't know if you're familiar with Triple Canopy.
At a peripheral level. I know a bunch of
Okay.
guys that work there as well. I actually don't know necessarily much about any of the contracts they did, though.
So who they are now is vastly different than who they were in '04. Triple Canopy was established by a group of CAG guys.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even accept your resume unless you came from a special operations unit. And then they also ran you through selection.
No shit.
Yeah, it was a 3-week selection, PT, shooting, and they were also teaching you the like personal protection stuff as you're going through selection. But tons of dudes got cut from that.
Was it designed, you're talking about personal protection, was it designed to have those type of contracts?
Yes.
Protection contracts?
Yep.
Okay.
It was they were bidding for State Department protection contracts.
Gotcha.
And so it was, I was really fit at the time and I could shoot, and I just knew how to keep my eyes open and my mouth shut. And I was 23 at the time, and I passed their selection. And I was put on a team, and it was like, 5 CAG dudes, 3 SEALs, a couple Force Recon guys, and me. And so it was a pretty wild experience as a 23-year-old Ranger to be put on this team. And then
You had to have been the youngest guy.
I was. Yeah.
Probably by a substantial margin.
I was the youngest guy. A lot of them were career military guys. And so I showed up, and I just tried to be the guy. I knew when it came to experience, they all had vast amounts of experience. And I was just deployed to Afghanistan twice, But I ran with that. I'd be the guy. I'd check the tire pressures in the car every day, check the oil, and just like do all the shit work.
That's the most valuable dude right there.
And just show the guys like, hey, I'm happy to be here.
It's
like
not
this.
sexy work. Let's be honest and upfront about that. It sucks, and nobody wants to do it. But I tell you what, you look back on successful operations or teams, dude, those guys are the linchpin that holds that stuff together.
Absolutely, And so it's funny. And they were also paying us like $30K a month.
That doesn't suck.
No, that doesn't suck. But the funny thing is, like I always tell people, I would have done my 04, 05 deployments for free. I would have paid to have done those deployments because I was working under retired Delta dudes that were just the most squared away guys you'd ever operate with. And it's funny too, because people don't realize what the contracting world was back then. It was, yes, on its surface, it was protection. But our team leader would be like, hey guys, we need to go do a route recce today. Let's go drive around downtown Ramadi, see what's going on down there. We all know what that means.
I was going to say I could give you a rough guesstimate of what that's going to terminate in.
And I saw tons of combat as a contractor for State Department. And it was, like fighting from rooftops, like vehicle ambushes, and just on and on and on. And
who did you guys report to during that time period? I asked that because who was I having the conversation with? The guy whose podcast I put up today. His name is Ephraim Matos. He went through BUDS, did some combat deployments, and at 24 got out, and while on terminal leave, got on an airplane to Erbil and linked up with and volunteered to provide medical coverage fighting in Mosul. And I was like, and he's like rolling around with an AK. I was like, hey, who are you reporting to? He's like, that's a good question. I'm like, whose authority were you operating under? He's like, that's also a very good question. I was like, holy shit, man.
No, that's funny. And I actually lived in Erbil later on in 2009 for a year. And it was, but it was all through U.S. contracts. But there are Erbil International Airport, you can buy a ticket to that right now. And
he went?
Yeah, you can land there and link up with...
on terminal fucking leave. And I asked him, like, did you tell the command? He was like, oh, no. No,
Yeah,
I was just going back to wherever.
I love hearing fucking stories like that, man, because it's like they didn't get enough of it in, and they're just going to go put themselves right in the middle of the shit.
Oh, and he did. And like literally front lines, dragging people to ambulances. Like, he just straight up clearing the streets of Mosul, not as like a direct fighter, but would engage when engaged. And I was like, at 24, like, God, I'm a bitch.
That's badass, man.
It's awesome.
Yeah, our guy, I mean, it's no secret who I worked for. His name was Keith Kidd, and he was a State Department ambassador, or a State Department diplomat, and he answered to the ambassador.
So if you guys, anything that happened involving you guys, you would answer to him and he would answer to them. Okay.
Correct.
I'm always curious about the chain of command there, because in the military it's very easy to articulate where things are going to go, but the contracting world, which I have zero experience with, and I don't know if it's by design, but I certainly don't know much about it, so I have to assume that most people know very little about the mechanisms that allow those things to happen.
It was real weird, too, because in 2004, that's when that first kicked off.
Yeah.
And so trying to establish, like, who we fell under as far as like legality.
Yeah, who is authorities?
And so, it was like, okay, well, you can't be processed under UCMJ, and you can't be processed under local authorities because we're not going to just let you guys fucking hang out to dry.
Yeah.
And obviously, State Department doesn't have like a disciplinary action like UCMJ or anything like that. So it was kind of a gray area, and that's why a lot of fucked up shit happened with contractors.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, man, because contracting got a bad name because a few shitheads did some stupid shit and killed innocent people and did exactly what everybody's seen on the news. And let's go level playing field. That shit happens in the military too. Oh, 100%.
The difference is, I think that the accountability is much more clear and concise because they have a route that can be followed for that.
Absolutely. But it just kind of put a sour taste in everybody's mouth with civilian contractors. But I can tell you from my personal experience, 95% of those guys are good dudes. They're a bunch of special operations veterans that are now just trying to cash in on some money and be able to set up their future, and buy their house or whatever. And it kind of sucked how that all played out. But it also, it's a two-tiered approach. Not only were guys like becoming less and less capable because they're hiring dudes with lower resumes.
Is that because they needed more?
And so the company needs more billets filled, and so they're lowering the standards.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you got guys that somehow weasel their way on a contract, never even been in the military. It's like, oh, I was a cop in Arkansas for 10 years, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing here?
Yeah. Soldier of Fortune magazine in the back pocket.
Yeah. Seriously.
Right after selection at development group, they surged us over early for the tail end of the Karzai detail. I got there after the assassination attempt, and then we turned over with Dynacore. And I have nothing negative to say about Dynacore. I'll just say it was interesting. There were some handlebar mustaches, some leather vests. I was like, is this a fucking biker gang? Like,
yeah, straight up.
And again, I didn't say that with no judgment, but I was just like, okay, you guys you just have a different system to operate underneath.
Yeah, so that was a fun phase of my life, man. I really enjoyed contracting. It was all the good aspects of the military without all the bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing is you could pull the plug whenever you want.
Yeah, what were you obligated to them for? Just
Nothing.
one contract at a time?
You were under contract with them for, I think Triple Canopy it was year contracts, 90 on, 30 off. So
that's good money.
Yeah, it was good money. And but still, it's a civilian company. So if shit got stupid, you could walk.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know? I mean, you might not be welcome back. You might burn your name in the industry.
But you're not tied by an enlistment contract.
Yeah, you're not tied to anything. So it was nice, man. So yeah, I did that until 2009. I got a Yahoo Messenger picture when I was in Erbil, and it was from my wife, and it was a pregnancy test. She's like, "Hey, I think it's time to put this shit behind us." I'm like, "All right." I mean, I figured I'd do it, just run until it ran its course, because where else could you make that kind of money and just have that kind of lifestyle, you know? But
and then it ran its course.
Yeah, it ran its course, and I was like, "All right, I get it." So I came home, and that's when I put in with the US Marshal Service. And so,
did you have any idea that you were going to go? Had you been thinking about it before?
You know, it's funny. It was through Jiu-Jitsu. I started Jiu-Jitsu in 2004. I actually started Jiu-Jitsu. Maybe we'll circle back to this. And
yeah, I'm curious how you started.
Okay, you know what? We'll go into it right now.
Yeah,
then.
Go for it. We got, like I said, we got 45 hours.
Yeah, we got 45 hours. I was in Ramadi. Were you deployed to Ramadi?
We would pass through, never stationed. We were always basing out of the green zone. Okay,
so I was at a little, it was called Blue Diamond. It was a little camp right along the river there. And there was a couple SEALs that were on my team. And one of them's like, "Hey, bro, you want to train tonight?" I'm like, What do you mean? What do you do?
That's such a broad, vague question. What a dickbag move. Now that we know what you're talking about.
No, that was the best. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
in hindsight, but that night I bet it sucked.
No, it was perfect for me because, you know, I was young, I was fit, I was strong, I'd never lost a fight, and so I thought I was like a tough guy, you know.
Yeah.
And then I realized quickly the reason I never lost a fight is because I never fought anyone that knew what the fuck they were doing.
God, isn't that a powerful realization to have? Isn't it?
It's insane.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's funny too because everyone always says, with jiu-jitsu and with MMA, you know, like, "Hey, check your ego at the door." No, man. Like, your ego is what brings you here, you know. and so yeah, this dude was come to find out, he was a Muay Thai fighter and a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
That's a handful.
And he just beat the fucking brakes off me. And he's a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine to this day. I probably can't give him a shout out because he's a team guy, right?
Yeah, if he's still active, then just
he's not active, but still.
It's up to you. I don't care.
All right. No, he's kind of a low key guy, so I'll leave it at that. But
we'll just call him Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Dude, that guy, like, he beat me so bad that in a moment I was like, dude, every single thing I've done in my life up until this moment is wrong.
What did he do? Did you guys just roll up to a set of mats and it's like,
yeah, dude,
party?
we just did like full contact MMA. It has like leg kicks to the point where I couldn't even stand, takedowns to mount, knee on belly, just beat the shit out of me. And
you know the percentage of people that respond positively to that versus negatively? You're like, this is the best thing that ever happened. Most people are like, oh my God.
Well, don't get me wrong. I hated it. I mean, I literally remember limping around for days.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Like, I can't allow another man to be able to do that to me. I can't allow that. That's like fucking everything that I thought that I was just taken away from me. And so I started training with him every single day while we were deployed. And dude, we trained together on and off for years because the contract world's weird. You'll bounce around, you'll be with guys for a while, and then you'll part, and then you'll link back up. So every time I was on contract with him, training. But then when I got home, I signed up at a jiu-jitsu academy and then a full contact MMA school too. And
they were separate?
Yeah, separate. 2 separate academies just to geek out on both aspects of it. And I was training 7 days a week, just trying to get it in as much as I could.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny talking to him years later, the reason he got into jiu-jitsu was he was doing a pool evolution. And I don't remember if he was in buds or if he was already a team guy, but he said he watched Jocko walk up to a dude and grab a cross-collar choke and put him to sleep with it. And, you know, this was like, I think this was still in the 90s where people didn't know what jiu-jitsu was.
Yeah, Jocko was actually pretty goddamn early.
Way ahead of everybody else, especially.
Pisses me off, and I tell him that every time I see him.
And so it's funny. He's like, dude, I watched him just touch this guy's neck, and he fell asleep and he passed out and he set him on the ground. And he's like, I have to know what that is. And he goes, so that's what started me on the path.
So I have a side story about Jocko. This is actually third hand, but after I tell the story, I think we can both agree it likely happened. He's up giving a brief, and I think one of the new guys was basically told, like, go try to sneak up behind Jocko and just stand as close to him as you can get and put your nose, like, right up against him. And he just turned around, rear naked, choked him out, dropped him on the floor, turned around, and just continued the brief.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what Jocko would do.
No factor.
Oh, God. He makes it. Do you follow him on Instagram?
I do, of course.
So he made this video this morning, and I already sassed off on made a comment. He commented back. I'm like, how far can I take this? Because there's a fine line. I don't actually want to piss him off because I have a ton of respect for him. But at the same time, he always does these Monday videos, and today's just like, get up and get after it. And I just want to do a video like 04:25 p.m. Just rolled out of bed. I was thinking about getting after it, but fuck that, because hard work is hard, and I'm gonna hit the rack. You know, just I want to be the opposite Jocko.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a rare dude, man.
It is, and it's crazy the platform that he has. It's like I just think it's really cool that. Well, there's pros and cons, obviously, to these goddamn devices and social media. But one of the biggest pros, I think, is access to people to see that type of stuff. Otherwise, you and I might be the only people who understood that there's I'll call him a unique creature out there like that wandering among us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jocko cross-collar choking somebody, I'm going to say that 100% happened.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's funny because, that changed the trajectory for the rest of my life. I've been chasing jiu-jitsu ever since. And circle back around when I joined the Marshal Service. By this time, I was already a brown belt out of a Gracie Baja school out of Seattle, which great guys, good training. Like, I got nothing bad to say about them. But jiu-jitsu in Los Angeles, California versus everywhere else in the world was just night and day different.
Other than, and I don't know this having never been there, but have heard about Brazil. Other than that, would you say it's like the U.S. version of Brazil?
Well, no, like my coaches, like Joao Assis and Buchecha, like talking to them about it, they say, you know what? The dudes that are good enough to make it and chase the dream and actually make money with jiu-jitsu, they all relocate to America.
Really?
Because that's where the money's at. So the dudes that are good enough out of Brazil end up coming to America anyways.
So the knowledge, it might have started and originated there, but the knowledge has now crossed that border.
And then Brazilians hate the snow and they hate the cold. So like you're going to see them just naturally congregate in Southern California and South Florida. And so, I went down there and just continued training. And
you noticed a difference from your Pacific Northwest school to the LA school?
Yeah, and I try and say this in the most respectful manner possible because I don't want to take anything away from those schools in Seattle. But when I showed up, and I didn't even know who Buchecha was at the time because he hadn't won the world title yet.
Yeah.
And I just looked at like what schools were convenient for me based on my commute and my work schedule.
Pure geography choice.
Yeah, straight up. And it was this little school in Corona, California. It was Checkmat Corona. And I walk in there and it was Marcus. And I'm like, hey, what's up, man? Like, I'm looking for a new school, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, let's train. And so I put a brown belt on and just got absolutely eaten alive by some of those dudes down there. And I remember telling Marcus afterwards, I was like, bro, like, I want to start back over as a white belt under you. Straight up. Like, I've only been doing jiu-jitsu, I don't remember how many years at that point. Let's see, it would have been 6.5, I think. And I was already a brown belt. I felt like I kind of got fast-tracked.
Yeah.
And now he's like, you know what, man? You earned that. You just represent your belt as hard as you can. Keep training. And don't worry about the color that's wrapped around your waist. And that's what I ended up doing. And I was with those guys for over 5 years before I got my black belt. So,
what did you think the difference was? Like when you said you got handled by them, what was it a difference in?
It was straight up
approach,
philosophy. I'll tell you, it's a difference in intensity. That's all. And, I mean, Checkmat is known. They have an aggressive approach to training.
Okay.
And so it's not like.
When you say that, do you just mean a harder roll or
a faster roll? I would say
when you say, I think people, and actually I'll hear people say intensity when it comes to rolling, and I guess when I hear that, I think there's going to be more pressure, more smashy. But are you talking about pace versus?
I would say pace.
Okay.
Yep. If you look at like Checkmat's a big we put a ton of energy into passing.
Okay.
Like if you're in any type of guard, I don't care if you're on the ground or if you're standing, if they have any type of control on you, you're actively trying to pass. There's Toriandos and back steps and leg drags and just go, step throughs, just go.
Constantly pressuring.
Constantly trying to advance to get the pass. And so if you're a guard player and someone's coming at you like that, I mean,
It's exhausting.
Watch Leander Lowe fight, right?
Oh, yeah,
That's a perfect example of a guy that just constant pressure on the pass. Just go. And I realized, like, oh, okay, this isn't just jiu-jitsu. You have to be, like, a savage athlete to keep up with these guys.
At that level?
Yeah.
Well, you even said you've slapped hands with some of these guys, and I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's
like, oh, shit, we just let the tiger out of the cage.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, because after training with them for years and years and years, when I go with those guys that are at the pinnacle, it still doesn't feel much difference. Like I told you in the truck ride here, my students now, because I own an academy north of Seattle, and they'll ask me like, hey, when you go with Joao or Buchecha, like if you were to roll 10 times, would they catch you like 5 and you'd catch them 5? And I just have to laugh because like
probably out loud.
Yeah, straight up, man. Because it's like I told you, it's 100-0. I'm getting submitted every time. There's levels to this stuff, and whatever they got, I don't got. But I'm going to keep trying to get it,
How long did it take you to adapt to that different philosophy of the pressure and the higher level of intensity from where you came from?
I'd say probably just a few months. You
had the framework. It was more applying or just maybe dropping your jiu-jitsu into a different gear?
Yep.
Okay.
For sure. And just kind of having a different psychological approach.
Okay.
Because if you look at a lot of academies, and again, this is nothing derogatory about them. Everybody trains how best suits them. But you'll see guys like both sit down on their butts, slap and bump, and then kind of like crawl into each other's guards and things like that. Like you would never see that at my academy. It's like 100% of the time you're trying to win, you know? And then the other thing that was really different for me was at Joao's school, 100% of rolls start on your feet.
Regardless of a size discrepancy?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you have a tournament coming up. It doesn't matter if it's a guy and a girl. Like, I mean, obviously you're not going to double leg some girl you have 100 pounds on. And you know what I mean? You're going to be a responsible training partner.
I know some people who would do that.
Yeah. Well, don't we all, right?
At full speed, just a blast double with the forehead to the sternum.
And then that's when the coach has to go give it back to them.
Yeah, they're like,
when you see guys acting
I got
like that.
next.
Yeah. But, and it's funny too, because starting on your feet changes your entire game. People don't realize how different the game is starting on your feet.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn to wrestle. And then you also have to learn to pull guard. And I know that that's blasphemy to say out loud. But guard pulling's an art. If you want to be a guard puller, you got to practice guard pulling. Because if you don't, you get passed on the pull, and now you're in a shit position right from the get-go, Yeah,
and somebody that you in real life are going to have an altercation with, they have a vote too. I mean,
exactly.
They could change your game. You might meet up to somebody who their game is the exact opposite of yours. Like it plays, you know what I mean? Like it just really sinks in really well, and you might have to modify it. I look at my own game when you're saying this. Like for me, I know for a fact that stand-up is my weakest point because I will often start seated because I am heavier and taller than most of the people.
Uh-huh.
And the mat space can often be limited due to the number of people on, like in an open mat.
Yeah.
And let's just say, even if I'm trying to do good stand-up, I don't always stay in my square. It can get a little velocity and weight behind it, and I don't want to hurt. Like, I'm actually scared of hurting somebody else by being out of control. Cause I'm
of course.
Fucking idiot, and I don't know. Like there's an art to taking somebody down in a controlled manner as well. And I'll tell you right now, I don't have it.
Yeah.
But hearing you say that, I actually really need to. I need to redouble my efforts in that front for sure, because I can personally recognize that as a deficiency in my game.
Well, and something that Joao said that stuck with me, and I mean, he's a ADC champion. He's a really good wrestler. He's like, man, how can you consider yourself a ground fighter if you don't know how to get the fight to the ground?
Yeah.
That pretty much sums it up,
Yeah.
And so he put a lot of emphasis on takedowns and pulls and stuff, and it was cool, man.
It's practical. I mean, there's a variety of reasons, like I could just give you as to why I start seated, but I also am the only person that can stand myself up and force myself to work on that deficiency, which I will, and it's going to suck. But I actually kind of enjoy, like, I don't mind, because I'll stand up with certain people where there's less, and it's like, yeah, that didn't go my way, and then I'm just fighting my way out of a shit position, and I kind of enjoy that exercise as well, too.
Yeah.
Like, that was not a YouTube move that I just attempted, and now it's like, how do I defend myself again?
Yeah. It's so funny meeting jiu-jitsu guys. Like, I met you an hour ago, and we could talk for 10 hours about jiu-jitsu.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Me.
It's like it instantly bonds you with this group of people that's just around the world, you know?
And I don't have a lot of experience outside of the SBG gym network. So, and that's why I'm curious about your experiences moving around and how long it took you to adapt, because, I mean, I would imagine the human body being what it is, the fundamental principles are the fundamental principles. And if you could apply what you're talking about, that intensity and pace on top of that, because you already had those, so that makes sense to me that you were able to integrate them into your game.
Yeah.
If you didn't have those fundamentals, that would have probably just been a shit show.
And that style of training is geared for competition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always tell people, you need to know what you want out of jiu-jitsu. And competing may be part of it, but it may also not be part of it. Just depends on what your path is and what you want out of it.
Yeah.
So I always tell people that write my academy saying, hey, we want to check you out and see what your academy is about. I'm like, you know what? Also check out the other academies in the area.
Yeah.
Because I want, if you end up joining my academy, I want that because we're a good fit for you, not because I want your $100 a month, you know?
What do you tailor your academy towards?
You know, it's funny. It's kind of shifting. It's shifted over the last year, because initially I moved up from California and I wanted just to make killers and keep that energy going, and every round is fight to the death. And, but what I learned is...
No way, dude. When you say we're going to go at 10%, that's what we mean.
Yeah. You know,
hey, do you want to warm up? It's like...
The reality of owning a jiu-jitsu academy is, yeah, you want to make killers and you want to teach people good jiu-jitsu, but it's also a business too. And if you put all your energy into your killers, you're kind of shunning a lot of other people that deserve to have jiu-jitsu.
5 killers aren't going to turn the lights on and off.
Exactly. So instead, and me and Joao have talked about this in depth, it's like, instead of tailoring to your handful of murderers, like, you can still train those guys and have like after-hour sessions and stuff, but from a pure jiu-jitsu standpoint, it's better to tailor your academy to, like, we got moms that train now, and older people that train now, and it's not just about the money. It's about sharing jiu-jitsu in a manner that people are able to train at. Because if we tried to train at that level with some of these other people, it's something, it would just scare them away, and we couldn't be able to give them anything, you know?
So when I was explaining the lineage inside of SBG from Hegan to Howder to Matt, I was actually having this conversation with Matt no more than I think a week ago, and my coach was early on, and they were talking about, they have stories like just beating the shit out of each other with sticks. Like, it was full on. It kind of was like, it sounds like, I wasn't there, but it sounds like your first training session with your buddy overseas. And Matt was saying this, really the same thing. Like, he's like, I wonder how many thousands of people I turned away because of the philosophy that we were. He's like, listen, the guys that stuck around, they're ride or die forever.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective, if you want to grow and scale, it's I would imagine that's at the teeter-tottering balance that you have to constantly manage.
Yeah. And the other side of it that I think is important, though, is that, I mean, I'm not a MMA school, and we don't teach full contact fighting and stuff like that, but I think intensity translates to self-defense better than just keeping it playful, Well, your self-defense scenario is going to probably occur near maximal heart rate. Exactly.
And whether that's an emotional or mental response or physiological, I personally think that you'd be better prepared if you train closer to that threshold.
Yep. And so, I mean, I'm grateful that when I started training, my jiu-jitsu was also based around MMA, and I did a few fights and trained for years and that stuff. And then I moved away from it because I realized, look, I'm not trying to be Chuck Liddell. I'm not trying to get a UFC title. I'm just some dude that likes to train. And I was getting headaches all the time. I was like, this doesn't.
I wonder where that's from.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense, man.
I get headaches and nosebleeds. It's super weird.
Oh, my nose was broken so many times. Remind me to show you a picture after this podcast, because I got it fixed last year.
All right.
But yeah, I couldn't breathe for a decade through my nose.
So you found jiu-jitsu prior to going into the Marshals, but did it have any bearing on you deciding to go the LEO world? Because you obviously, the Marshals are straight up, I mean, they're fall into the law enforcement category, right? How did you decide to go from the contracting world to the law enforcement world?
So 2 guys on my jiu-jitsu team in Seattle were deputies with the Marshal Service out of the Seattle office. And they're like, hey, I think this would be a good fit for you. I think you'd love this agency. And I ended up putting in for it and just got picked up. And it was a long process. Federal hiring process was like a year. So I just sat at home and did online school and burned through some of my GI Bill and ended up getting picked up and went to the academy, and I got stationed in Los Angeles. And so
the Mecca.
Yeah. In Los Angeles, I mean, I'm real grateful that I got stationed there for jiu-jitsu, but also just all the friendships I made and all the people that I know. It was a cool period of time. And a lot of guys got stationed in shit places, like along the Mexican border and whatnot. So I feel like I kind of lucked out there. But the agency as a whole, and again, like, I don't want to say a bunch of disparaging shit about them, but the reality of the Marshal Service, from my experience, was a lot of courtroom stuff, a lot of prisoner transports, and kicking doors and going after fugitives was like 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
Of what we did, you know? And you always see deputies on TV chasing dudes like Tommy Lee Jones going after Harrison Ford, and like, you're expecting like a running and gunning career.
Much like the movie Navy SEALs. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah. So.
Or Tears of the Sun, or Zero Dark. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, you know? And so like, after a few years of that, and I wasn't digging it, I mean, it wasn't a bad job, but I just wasn't digging it. I was like, I don't want to give 20 years to this. You know?
What would your day-to-day look like? I mean, I don't even know necessarily what marshals do.
Oh, I mean, more often than not, I'm sitting in a courtroom producing a federal prisoner for his court hearing.
Meaning you're responsible for his transport?
I'm responsible for his transport and his physical security while he's at his court appearance. And so here's how it works. In the federal system, you know, the ATF, FBI, DEA, all these 3-letter agencies, when they're arresting people, once they're booked into jail, they're now remanded to the US Marshal Service.
Okay.
And that agency is now responsible for that prisoner. So anytime his initial appearance, his change of plea, his sentencing, literally anytime that prisoner needs to go and stand in front of the judge, a deputy has to be standing next to him.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and that is 90% of what the Marshal Service does. And so, I mean...
Is there anybody in the Marshal Service, like Tommy Lee Jones, running around chasing people?
So, yeah, there's different positions that you can work yourself into, like called IOD. Yeah, what is that? Investigative Operations Division, where now you are more focused on investigations and fugitive work. But sometimes it's all luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it can take 10 years to get one of those positions.
I was going to say, I bet you, like just about anything else where there's limited positions, I bet seniority plays in there.
Yes, exactly, you know? And so I was with them from 2011 until 2015. And then I got word that my dad was sick back in Seattle. And I said, I went to the Marshal Service. I said, hey, listen, this is the situation. I need to be with my father. Like, the whole reason I left the military contracting world behind is because I thought in my head it was time to put more focus on my family, you know? And they said, hey, we can't, unfortunately, there's no positions open in Seattle. We can't offer you any type of TDY or any type of transfer. So you have to stay in Los Angeles. And I was like, yeah, I can't do that. I'm telling you guys, this is what it is. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I was always a good deputy, well-respected on the force. But I was like, I'm putting family first. And if that means I separate from the agency, then that's what it means. And so I moved home. And, my dad lived for 5 weeks after that. And we got a lot of closure. It was really good. So
I'm glad you got that time.
Yeah, that's a decision that I'll never regret. And I mean, it was stressful too, because I had little kids and I was making, enough to feed them. The Marshal Service doesn't pay well, but I was comfortable,
it pays.
Yeah. And that's when I was like, you know what? I need to open my Jiu-Jitsu Academy and start this thing. And
were you a black belt at that point?
Yes.
When did you get your black belt?
I got my black belt in 2015, shortly before I moved home.
Cool.
And so, and I never thought I thought I was going to be a brown belt for the rest of my life. And so it was a surprise. and I didn't want my black belt. You know what I mean? Like, because now you have a target on your back. And especially with the guys that I was rolling that had black belts, I was like, yeah, that's not coming anytime soon. But no, Joao surprised me. I got my black belt shortly before moving home to Seattle, and opened up the academy. And I mean, I loved my academy, and we have a great group of guys. But the reality of jiu-jitsu, it's hard to have that be your sole income.
Yeah.
When you have a family of 5, you know.
Well, and people don't understand the difference between being a coach and a business owner.
Yeah, 2 different things for sure.
And for people listening who have never coached, there's a performance aspect of that is fucking exhausting.
Yep.
Like, you want to be on for your students, right? You're there, you're presenting your academy, and then they get to leave, but there's another set rolling in, and you're just in the back like, how many more of these do I have to do?
Straight up, man. And it's funny too, because and I never give myself, I feel like, enough credit, because all of my students no, dude, we love it when the classes you teach and your energy and your technique. But if you ever are in Huntington Beach, go to a class that's led by Joao Assis. Like, the dude is one of the most technical guys you'll ever meet, but his energy, it's palpable, man.
That's awesome.
Like, he makes you want to train. He makes you want to grind, and he makes it fun, even though it's exhausting and you're getting your ass kicked. And that's the environment you're trying to build.
There's few people out there who have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who will try to create that artificially.
Yep.
But you can see through that veneer.
Exactly.
I've met very few people that you truly get around. You're like, oh shit, this dude makes me want to be a better person in every way.
Yep.
Yeah. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It's very rare to find, though. The fact that you found that just based off of geography is awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because, and I tell people this all the time, because once you find someone that you click with, you should probably go out of your way to make that your jiu-jitsu coach, you know?
For sure.
Like, when I was with Marcus, that was out of convenience that I met him there. But then when I met Joao through Marcus, because they're friends, dude, I had to drive 50 miles out of my way to train with him, and I would do it every night.
Yeah.
Because it's okay, that's my guy. That's the guy that I want to be under for the rest of my life. I want that to be part of my lineage. You know?
I live an hour out of town.
And
an hour and 15 to the northern location, 5 days a week.
Yep. See, I mean, that's just part of the grind. You got to understand, if you ever want to truly pursue this and become proficient at it, that's just part of the grind.
Well, I see the value in it for me as a person, too.
Yeah.
It's, like I was telling you in the car, it's just like, people you need to do this. I'm like, you need to go fuck yourself. Jiu-jitsu is awesome. I'm like, you're gay. And then I started, I was like, God damn it, where have I been for the last 20 years? But then I see the value, and it's like, an hour-long car ride, who cares? It's worth it. I get to think about it on the way there and then decompress on the way back.
And I know it sounds cliche, but it's the truth. The lessons you learn on the mat apply to so many other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
It just helps you become grounded in a bunch of different areas that are hard to become grounded in. Let's face it, dude. We're ego-driven people. And I feel like always being put in check on the mats kind of transfers over to a lot of other aspects. So,
and I think, again, like we were saying on the way over, it gives you a better optic. You watch people who you see and you're like, oh my God, that guy's Superman. But then you watch Superman get ragdolled and you're like, wait a minute. That dude looks like he's an accountant. I don't want to talk shit to anybody ever.
No.
So it changes your behavior. It changes your optic. It changes your appreciation. And I've found in the short time I've been doing it, the more capable these people are, the less likely they are to ever actually engage in any type of violence.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, especially the younger guys, because when I was younger, I loved fighting, at bars and just being fucking stupid, And I bet if I had an outlet, I bet if I was training, that shit would have never happened.
Or if you were think about it, if you had been a black belt back in those days, you'd be like, this is not worth my time.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do I want to risk some random cold cock and get a concussion? Obviously I could tool you up, but I'm going to go have a cocktail.
No, it's I kind of think I fell into jiu-jitsu at the right time, because it would have been beneficial for me when I was younger in some aspects, but it might have been fucking dangerous too.
Yeah,
knowing how to fuck people up when you're 18 years old and getting in fights at parties and stuff.
Well, you hear it all the time, right? And this is probably true of law enforcement as well. A badge doesn't make you a good person.
Yeah.
You could use a badge for evil just like you could use it for good.
Yep.
Just like a black belt.
Very true,
a black belt could be used for good, and I have to imagine that, it could also be a tool for people who want to use it to oppress others.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't want to talk about that aspect of it too much because I have to imagine there's just fucking weird people in the world, and I wouldn't want to empower them and give them more tools. You know what I'm trying to. Yeah, that. And I would imagine you guys probably encounter that as coaches or owners occasionally too. Like, maybe this person's a touch off. Like, you don't need this skill.
You hear it in the jiu-jitsu community, not all the time, but it's not uncommon to hear, like, this professor sexually assaulted a student.
Yeah.
Or this professor raped somebody. You know what I mean? So it's like, just because you have a black belt, you're not a good person.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a key to becoming a good person if that's a path that you're already trying to obtain and you're on. But there's shitheads that are real good fighters. We all know that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a tool. Like I said, it could be used for good or evil. So you were up there, you were doing your jiu-jitsu academy, realized that the theory of gym ownership and the concept, or the practicality of gym ownership were different.
And it was funny too, because I ended up doing I was doing some work at the Washington State Police Academy teaching jiu-jitsu up there, and I got approached by a guy. It's like, hey, are you looking to come back into law enforcement? I'm like, I don't know, maybe, what do you got? And ended up talking to him, and he talked to me about the Port of Seattle, and it just made sense. It was like they work 3 days a week as a police officer. That's almost a firefighter schedule.
Yeah.
So 3 days on, 4 days off, which would allow me to still keep a lot of energy with my gym. And it was good pay, good benefits, and I just got along with all the people there that I met, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back in. And I had to redo a police academy because the state of Washington doesn't recognize federal police academies.
They didn't recognize FLETC?
No, they didn't recognize FLETC. And so I had to go to, theirs is called BLEA, the Basic Law Enforcement, whatever it stands for. And I had to go through that, and then I became a police officer up in Seattle. And I was a police officer there, for 3 years. And it's a good agency. I worked for good people. I like my chain of command. I like my sergeants. Like, it's weird how this whole deal played out. It's probably good we're going into this now. Everyone's listening for an hour. Just listen to us talk about jiu-jitsu.
We get to talk about what we want to talk about. It's my goddamn podcast.
That's right, man.
I brought you here to talk about jiu-jitsu.
And so I never had anything bad to say about that department. And to tell you the truth, I still don't. Like, that department has, like, had my back and has supported me. And they take care of their people. Like, everything that I wanted in an agency, I found at that agency. And I was like, this is fucking awesome. And again, not to be disparaging about the Marshal Service, but I saw a lot of the opposite there. A lot of cutthroat shit, a lot of people like...
At the Marshal?
Yeah, backdooring, like backstabbing you and stuff. It's the federal system, because in the federal system, you're a number, man.
And the numbers there have got to be massive in comparison to the port,
And so I was enjoying being an officer there. And dude, it wasn't until all this shit kicked off a couple months ago, and it just started eating away at me. Every day I would turn the news on, and I would see like a surfer being hauled away in handcuffs.
And stand-up paddleboarder, same thing. I saw that.
Yeah, and like boats surrounding him, and like it went on and on and on. And the lady at the park, or the guy playing catch with his daughter, and it was becoming frustrating because it's like, as a law enforcement officer, it's up to us to police our own. Like, if you know what it's like in the teams or in battalion, like if someone's doing something fucked up, you grab that person, you pull them back, and you say, hey, bro, that's not how we roll. That's not what we do here, okay?
Yeah. And the earlier that happens, the better.
The better, right? And so this is the most interesting part about this whole deal. It's not like a 70-30 percentage or a 80-20. It's 100% of police officers that I've talked to about this say, man, that is so fucked up. I cannot believe people are getting arrested for walking their dog or opening their business. I can't believe it. Every single person I talk to, and I have friends all over the country from being in federal law enforcement as well, nobody could believe what was going on, but yet no one says a fucking word. It doesn't make any sense to me, you know?
So I have a question for you on that too, because I have no background in law enforcement at all. So how are those people able to be arrested? Like, I understand that law enforcement can detain people if they have like a reasonable suspicion or probable cause, but to arrest somebody, don't they have to be actually violating a law or breaking a law?
Well, that's what's ironic about this, because you and I both are confused about how that works. Because in the state of Washington, for me to put handcuffs on somebody and deprive them of their freedom, I have to have reasonable, articulable facts that this is the law that they broke. When you are improsing someone into prison, it literally says RCW, blah, 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 theft in the 3rd degree. And that's what they're booked and charged with. So I'm sure that there was some blanket order in these states that, hey, well, we're going to be booking under this law, and the governor or the mayor says, hey, people doing these things fall under this law. That's what I would assume.
Do they have the power to do that, or the authority to do that?
That's where this whole deal is just becoming a shitstorm, because I don't believe that they do. Laws have to be legislated. If one man can just decide, hey, you know what? I don't want hair salons open today. And like I said in the car ride, let's put the science aside, because I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. Let's put the science aside. It's still one man deciding the fate of other human beings. And that is not how our society works. And that's why it's becoming so frustrating for me, seeing all of these people having their liberties trampled on, and also having 100% of officers I talk to about it in agreement with me.
Did you have any of those issues happening inside of the Port of Seattle? Were you
No.
guys being asked to?
No.
Really? Okay.
No, and I talk about that in my first video. I said, luckily, I'm part of an agency that is not enforcing what I consider tyrannical orders.
So it was largely a message to other people
A
with
message
your
to other,
occupation.
yes. And so, it's funny because I was starting to get frustrated about this. I'm in the lunchroom watching the news, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? If that was my mom, I'd be taking that fucking cop down and putting him in his own handcuffs. They are going to make criminals out of people that are not criminals. Because if you're detaining me and you're putting me in handcuffs when I didn't commit a crime, I have the right to defend myself. Why the fuck should I just happily go to jail because some mayor decided that I need to have a mask on my face? And that's what started getting me fired up. And I'm like, this is going to go bad. This is going to go bad at some point, because people are going to get fed up with this shit.
And that's where you started. That's what, like I said, it really resonated with me when you started talking about the gap in public trust, because it's, for better or worse, some of my closest friends here in the Valley, not for better or worse, it's for better, they're law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse, law enforcement here is judged by the actions of things that happen elsewhere. And I was actually having a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday, and kind of just talking about that bridge in public trust. There was a video of an LAPD cop just beating the piss out of a homeless dude. That impacts how people think when an officer stops them and walks up to their
100%.
car. And that has to be like that. I don't ever want that to get lost, because it's important, and it shapes the dynamic in the relationship between the populace and the officers, and in those interactions. And I think if you look at a lot of the things that have gone south, it's because things either tried to get hidden, or that gap got so wide that the trust was completely lost. And then I'm sure in some areas it's probably never going to come back.
And a lot of times officers will just blindly support, oh, well, you didn't know what happened before the camera was turned on. And it's like, dude, if an officer's doing something wrong, he needs to be called out on it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that gap was frustrating to me, because when I'm in civilian clothes or I'm in my gi, if I'm in any attire other than a police uniform, people are friendly to me. I can conversate with people and shoot the shit and tell stories and stuff. I have no problem getting along with random people on a daily basis.
They'll engage with you at will without having what I would imagine you see often, either a suspicious or a fear-based mindset.
And as soon as I'm in uniform, people fucking steer clear of me. And dude, that hurts my heart, because it's all of these people have this misconceived notion of who I am as a man because of the uniform I'm in. And that is a result from years and years and years of the public trust constantly eroding when it comes to law enforcement. And so I saw that happening to me, on a daily basis. I'm walking around and I see people just avoid eye contact with me or move to the other side of the sidewalk. And it's dude, I'm just a fucking dude like you are. We could shoot the shit and have a beer and probably get along.
Yeah, you probably have more in common than you have.
But but because I'm in a uniform, there's this distrust, and that would always kind of bother me.
Did you feel that right from putting the uniform on?
Yep. Because as a deputy with the Marshal Service, we weren't uniformed.
Yeah.
So I never had that experience until I was a patrol level officer, and that's something that I never could get over, man. It always bothered me, because it
seems like it's palpable.
You could, it is straight up, and so I had that going on one aspect. And then the thing that started to bother me is, as I'm being vocal about these officers, in my opinion, trampling on people's liberty and treating people poorly across the country, the other officers in my department would say that, like, Greg, we're not being forced to do that here. So why is it such a big deal to you?
For every reason we just talked about.
Every fucking reason we just talked about. They're Americans. And it's like, dude, as soon as you start to say, like, over here versus over there, like, that's just shifting blame. You know what? Like, if a cop sees a cop doing something wrong, I feel like it's our duty to step up and be like, hey, this is how I fucking think you should be acting as a professional, and this is how I feel like you're violating people's rights. And if nothing else, it's at least going to make them look at themselves and be like, hey, well, you know, maybe I have to look inward and ask myself, what am I doing as an officer? You know?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the message that I wanted to get out to people. I wanted other cops to look at themselves and be like, hey, I know I'm getting a bi-weekly deposit into my Chase account, and that's cool, but is it worth it? Is it worth to pull a fucking mom away from her kid in handcuffs because she's at a swing on a park? You know what I mean? Like, I wanted officers to take that step back and be like, let's take my career out of it and let's look at who I am as a person. And so that's why I knew I needed to do it in uniform. You know, my agency's told me 100 times since then, they're like, Greg, if you just did that in your backyard with a t-shirt and shorts on, we would have had no issues with it.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have had the impact either.
It wouldn't have had the impact because that message had to come from a uniformed officer speaking to uniformed officers.
What got you over the edge when you finally were like, fuck it, I'm going to do this?
You know, I don't remember like a specific incident. It was just every day that I would look online or look on the news, more people's liberties are being trampled on and more people are being treated like shit. And I felt like as law enforcement, that's not our job. That's not our job to tell you have to wear a mask on, you know, a mask or not.
Well, that's an interesting point too, right? And I, again, talking with my buddy yesterday, people will often see on the side of, and again, I say all this being not any background in law enforcement, but you'll see on the side of a car, protect and serve. And people think that that's the job of law enforcement, but that's actually a motto. Mm-hmm. The job of law enforcement is to enforce laws.
Yeah.
So what, and again, this, like the woman on the swing, what's motivating that officer to go try to arrest her, and what law has that person broken?
I mean, I think nothing more is motivating them other than a mayor has said, hey, in this jurisdiction, these parks are closed. So maybe it's criminal trespass now. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what nexus they connect it to a crime.
Yeah.
But
do you think that most officers at a deep level have an understanding of the legalities of this guidance that the government or the governors and their actual, because my concern
absolutely
would be
not. My
concern would be an officer goes to, maybe the park scenario is not a good one because maybe that is criminal trespassing, but a surfer.
Yeah.
They try to arrest him. The guys it goes south. And let's say we're talking again about a guy who doesn't have maybe a lot of skills to protect himself, and he encounters a goddamn nerd assassin who also has a penchant for surfing.
Uh-huh.
And he starts getting his ass beat, and he goes to his Batman belt and blasts the guy. That cop is going to get sued for everything that happens, and he was driven to that point, or I'm concerned that he's driven to that point with a very hazy understanding of the authorities with which he is operating under.
Yeah, I think that the majority of cops out enforcing these things probably have a hazy understanding. You know, like I went to my chain of command and asked, like, what authority do we have to enforce these rules? And nobody really quite understands, you know? I can tell you...
That doesn't seem to be a great answer from the chain of command.
No, because it's new for everybody. But
that is true. And that is a fair... Like, it's in an unprecedented time, but that also shouldn't be a long-term excuse to not have precision and clarity.
I think we're going to see so much litigation. The aftermath of this is going to be litigation for years on end because...
Well, you feel it. You feel people like, no, I'm not going to stay at my house anymore.
And it's going to get worse, you know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, another big motivation for me bringing that to light and making that video was that it is going to get pushed to that point. And it is going to be people fucking cops up on the street.
The article I was telling you that I was reading, waiting for at the airport, one of the police had a glass bottle thrown at him, popped him in the side of the head with it. And there, you know, it had been like this escalation of escalation, and it's like I feel bad for both sides of the coin.
Yeah, no, and it's the majority of cops are pretty good-hearted people. Like, I think that's a misconception. A lot of people think cops are like these power-hungry dicks. Most cops that I work with are pretty good people. But I also think there's probably the majority of cops that don't want to push back because they are afraid about their livelihood being taken away. I mean, I pushed back just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm done now, you know? And it was, I mean, I'll walk you through that. I mean, I talked about it in my video.
When so you finally crossed the threshold, you're like, I'm going to record this.
Yep.
I'm obviously assuming you were on duty.
Yep.
Or you had an awesome movie set. You drove the patrol car home and
Yeah.
you did the just put my top on, but I don't have any pants on in this video move.
Exactly.
Recorded it, obviously. And did you originally just release it on your personal Instagram?
Dude, so here's the fucked up thing about it is my Instagram is connected to my Facebook.
So it auto-populates
Right.
over?
But what I don't do Instagram TV very often. I just do pictures and like short posts. For whatever reason, I post it to my Instagram, and the video, I guess IGTV needs like a business account or something. For whatever reason, it went to my Jiu-Jitsu Academy's account. So yeah, exactly what I wanted, right? And so
To further muddy the waters.
yeah,
of the
exactly.
narrative.
And so it's been seen 13 million times or whatever, and that's attached to my Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And the worst part about that is my phone number's right on there.
Personal phone number.
Personal phone number.
That's not awesome.
Yeah. So my phone has been blowing up for the last week. Like, I'm telling everybody that I talk to about doing podcasts or media appearance, I'm like, send me a text first. Say, hey, this is who I am.
Yeah.
So I know to answer, you know? But, yeah, I made the video, and the next day it started gaining traction. And
What do you remember what time you posted it?
I posted it like, I think it was like 4 p.m.
Okay, so towards the tail end of the day.
Yeah, and I didn't pay much attention to it. I
Yeah.
had to commute home and then went to bed. And then the next day I was off work, and I got contacted by my agency, and they're like, hey, your video's at 400,000 views. It's time to pull the plug on this. And so
Weren't you contacted first, though?
I got a text message before that.
Saying, hey,
Yeah.
essentially a positive.
Yeah, and it said, wow, what a, like, I don't remember verbatim, but it was like, powerful message, well done. I support this 100%. And I was like, oh, cool, you know?
Yeah.
And a few hours later, and I don't know the details of who got wind of this or where the orders came down. Like, some people think it may have come all the way from the governor. But I'm under the impression that somebody got wind of it. It was like, hey, your officer needs to pull that down right now. I think my agency was directed. But again, I'm not sure, you know.
Yeah.
Just kind of seeing how this all played out, it kind of leads me to believe that. But I got contacted and was told that it needed to come down. And it's funny because like, dude, I was just a cop talking about respecting people's constitutional rights. Like, there was nothing outrageous. There was nothing like, there's no ulterior motives. It's actually fucking bizarre to me that a cop just talking about respecting people's liberties is a viral message now.
Do you mind if I put the video into the podcast so people can hear it?
Oh yeah,
as well? Okay.
no, please do. You know, as a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people. And I'm hoping it's the minority of officers, but I'm not sure anymore, because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, using their own house as a place of business, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house, but we're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. Those are de facto arrests. You know, we're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. So let's talk about that. Let's read something right here off of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Among these, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, meaning our power and any government official's power is derived from the people. Okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. And this is what I'm seeing. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion. Okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. And I know people that have personally been stopped saying, we want to see papers showing that you're essential.
David 2, copy a phone call.
That is not how our job works, okay? What really has been pissing me off lately is the fact that these officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, what they're doing is they're making my job and my safety, or they're putting my job and my safety at risk. Because what you're doing is you're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers. And what that's going to do is it's going to, I mean, look at what's happened to law enforcement in the last 10 years. Less and less public trust, and more often than not, that is a result of isolated incidents that get blown out of proportion. They're not isolated anymore. They're happening every single day. And the thing that I want you guys to realize is that our power that we hold as law enforcement officers is nothing more than a facade. It's a badge and a gun. And people, you don't realize, if you haven't lived in anarchy, if you haven't seen combat, things can be stripped from people in a heartbeat. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that these actions are going to wake a sleeping giant, i.e. the American people, okay? They are going to be put in a position where they won't have their rights trampled anymore. And us as law enforcement officers, we'll have our ability to enforce the law stripped from us in about 10 minutes, okay? I think what is going to happen if this continues is we're going to see bloodshed in the streets, okay? I don't want to see bloodshed in the streets on either side of this coin. I don't want to see fellow officers get injured or killed, and I certainly don't want to see citizens get injured or killed. And I promise you, most of you out there doing these tyrannical acts against our citizens, you're not ready for combat. You're not mentally or physically ready for combat in the first place. I promise you, you don't want to go through that, and I hope I never have to go through that again. You don't get to just say, well, I'm doing this because I was told to do so, or I'm following orders, or I need to keep this job. Guess what? I need to keep this job more than anybody. I have 3 young children. I have 2 houses. Like, I have the same sob story that the rest of you guys have. But my personal choices and my living arrangements, no matter what they are, don't allow me to trample on people's rights. And I don't understand why that concept is so hard for people to understand. Listen, you need to stand up for what's right. You need to, if you're part of a department or an agency that is asking people or asking their officers or their deputies to impose on people's rights and infringe on their freedoms, you need to step up and say, no, that's not me. That's not what I signed up for, and that's going against my oath. And if that costs you your job, so be it. At least you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night. I've already expressed this to my department. And luckily for me, I come from a department that I feel like my chain of command shares my view, but I don't care what department you're part of or what your chain of command thinks. You don't get to trample on people's liberty. And so, you know, as a special operations veteran, I've fought on the streets of Iraq under the US government's guise of freedom. And I'm telling you what, the American people are going to you are going to wake a sleeping giant, and they are going to fight 10 times harder for their freedom on their soil than anything you've ever seen before. And if that's something you're willing to face, then keep trampling on people's rights. But I promise you, the American spirit of defiance is going to rise again, and it's going to be a big problem for our country. So I'll leave you with this, something that I learned as an E-nothing in the Army. No matter what situation you're put in, if you look inside yourself and ask yourself one question, am I doing the right thing? You ask yourself that, you know the answer. And no amount of money or no order or law or anything should be able to make you go against doing the right thing. So I'm imploring officers to look inside themselves and ask themselves, is this what I want to be doing to my citizens? And I think the answer is clear. And if we all stand up together, guess what? It'll be a non-issue, no factor, because people and law enforcement will be united like we should be.
Okay.
It's funny. I got a message from my buddy of mine yesterday, Andy Frisella from First Form Fitness, and he goes, "Bro, I can't fucking believe that a cop talking about liberty and respecting rights is something that goes viral. Like it's such a fucking obscure message now that it resonates across the entire country.
It's because of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, I'm nobody. And I don't think I'm unique by any stretch, but I've been enough places, as have you, to see, you know, people right now talking about how terrible the restrictions are on us. And I'm not going to put any value judgment as to whether they're right or wrong, but we've been to places where, like, this is their normal. You don't have freedom of movement. You certainly don't have freedom of speech.
Nope.
Second Amendment, it's not really. It's just generationally handed down. Here's your AK when you're 4 years old. You know, you get a birthday cake and a Kalashnikov. It's a classic pairing. You know, there are no grocery stores. You know, it's just you. I have a different perspective, I think, and a different appreciation of how fucking fortunate we are to have what we have. And I think a lot of people go through their day to day and they don't think about their freedoms until they're pressed on a little bit. And, you know, until they feel like they're pushed into a corner, because we're so goddamn lucky with what we have. And because of people feeling pressed right now, I think it created the perfect tinderbox for that message to go, you know, towards Saturn, like it is. And not only fortunate, but I think a lot of people probably don't understand how fragile it is as well. There's a very, thin line.
And guys like us that have seen combat, like, I mean, I remember there's countless stories of, you know, Ramadi, as soon as Saddam was overthrown, you'd think it'd be like, oh, time to rejoice and party. Like, oh no, it's like, hey, my neighbor that lives 4 blocks down the street, I've always fucking hated that guy. I'm going to gun down his whole family. Like, that shit happened all the time.
Yeah.
And the tribal warfare just started blowing up. And it's like the human psyche, once the gloves are taken off and you don't have the restrictions of law, people go fucking bananas.
I hear, you hear people like, it's going to be revolution in the street. Every time I hear somebody say that, I'm like, you don't want that.
You don't want that.
You don't want that.
I know, and that drives me nuts, dude. And I literally said that in my video. I said, if we push people to where they push back and it becomes actual armed conflict, I promise you, like the majority of officers that are out there and kind of infringing on what I consider infringing on people's rights, you are not emotionally and physically ready for what combat looks like. Like, to be emotionally and physically ready for combat, it's a full-time job, as you know. And like, all these fucking cops that are just there for a paycheck, once that switch gets turned, it could be fucking terrible, dude. And that was another motivating factor for that video, is like, dude, people need to realize what's at stake here.
Yeah.
And I think the fact, I mean, it's been shared like 500,000 times. The fact that that message resonated with people proves that this is something that people are thinking about.
I have received hundreds of messages from law enforcement officers, and the vast majority of them will start with, hey, I am an officer at fill in the blank. I agree with this message 110%. You got to contact. Like, that's how I originally reached out. And like I said, I was so hesitant to reach out because the only thing that I didn't want to do was make what you were going through worse.
Yeah.
Because there's, at a certain point, it's like, you can see the finality of it, but there's also a certain point where, like, I don't know how big this podcast will be. I suspect, given it, we're still talking about the same things that caused that video, that it will be well received. The last thing I want to be like, for it to go, fucking stage 5 nuclear, because they're like, that's it. Yeah. He's at it again.
No, you know what? I mean, it's definitely been overwhelming with emails and calls, and like, I even had a fucking news reporter knock on my door, and I'm just sitting there in Ranger panties, like, come on, man, But
Ranger panties are a real thing.
Yeah, they're a real thing in my house. Although I'll tell you what, I just got in contact with the Sunga Life guy.
He's ex-team guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's ex-team guy. That's my new thing, man.
Are you going to go with the short version or the Speedo version?
If you want to hear something funny, is I was just talking shit on Instagram, and I said, hey, hopefully they come out with a shorter version of these. Bro, he writes me an email, and he goes,
How short do you want it?
Do you want a shorter version? And he goes, because my friend Rudy Reyes, I don't know if you know who Rudy Reyes is.
I know Rudy, and he is out of his fucking mind.
He goes, my friend Rudy Reyes gets custom extra short ones, so we can hook you up. And I was like, all right, bro, let's do it.
Rudy Reyes is essentially wearing an eye patch over his sack.
I know, it's hilarious.
It's about enough fabric to make a cocktail napkin, and he's just like out there doing lunges. I'm just like, God damn it, Rudy. I don't want to see that. I don't know who does want to see that. Apparently somebody does, but knock it the fuck off.
Yeah, I love it though, man. But yeah, so to take it back to the video, my agency said, hey, you got to take it down.
Did they say that to you in framing it? Because I'm assuming it violates the social media policy.
That's what they framed it as.
Okay.
And that's where this is kind of strange, because I said, well, past practice, every officer in the department has all kinds of shit on social media. That's not something that's enforced or really looked at, you know?
Did you think about the social media policy before you recorded it? Like, was it in your mind?
I did. And that's why I turned my hat around. Okay. That's why my hat's backwards, so you can't see my agency.
Oh, okay.
And my badge is out of view of the shot, which says my agency on it.
Okay.
So the policy states you can't have anything that would suggest that you're a Port of Seattle police officer. I said, okay. I felt like I did that.
You could genericize what you're wearing.
But they felt like I didn't do that. And so that's kind of one of the things we're hung up on right now. And we'll see how it all shakes out. But they told me it needed to come down. And I said, I'm in a real bad position right here, sir, because the entire tone of my video was, if you feel something is right, you got to fucking put your neck out there and you got to stand behind it, no matter what it costs. Like, that was the fucking tone of my video. So if I'm preaching that to officers and imploring them to be that person, and then as soon as I get my hand slapped and say, hey, we don't want you out there talking to people like that, take that shit down. Oh, okay, sorry. Like, I would feel like a bitch for the rest of my life. Like, everybody that saw that video and then saw that I pulled it down, like, my integrity's shot, you know?
It's one of the toughest things to recover from. If there's a divergence between your words and your actions,
yeah, exactly.
People can cut through that bullshit like a knife. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa.
And so I'm like, I'm not trying to be a martyr or go out on my shield or like say, you know what, I told the man to fuck off. Like, that wasn't my motivation on any of this. My motivation was simply like, hey, this is a message that I stand behind as a man and as an officer, and I can't recant those words. Like, I can't do it. And I was very respectful to him. Like, and both the people in my chain of command that I talked to were nice to me, and we had a good conversation. But I said, if you guys have to fire me for this, then do it, because that's where this is at. In my heart, this is a hill that I have to die on. And I think that's another reason. I don't think this thing would have caught as much steam if people didn't see, like, oh, okay, I'm literally going to lose my job over this, because that's how much I believe in this message, you know?
Yeah, if it had just been a statement that had been, like a paper tiger statement, that had no teeth to it, for sure, I think it would have been different. I was surprised to hear, again, from a perspective of not knowing much about law enforcement, that the police union, from my understanding, which is there to advocate for the officers, was in agreement swiftly with firing you. That one, I was like, what the fuck? What's going on with that?
Well, and this is weird, man, because, I mean, my union is Teamsters 117, and they're always like, I mean, we joke that they're like part of the mob, that they're straight up gangsters, that they make shit happen, you know? And I talked to the president, and she's a great lady. And I mean, her husband's actually 2nd Battalion. So, like, we had a connection, you know? It was, and we had a long, good conversation. And she's like, Greg, I'm in agreement with your message, but the reality of this is they're going to pin you on an insubordination charge because they told you to do something and you told them, no, I'm not going to do it. And she goes, in the law enforcement world, that's about as black and white as it gets. And termination is going to be inevitable on this one. And so
it's interesting they can have that level of finality and clarity on that, but such an incredible level of haziness and ambiguity on these authorities to infringe on the rights.
And so, I mean, I think part of it, I mean, it's legitimate. They are moving forward with the insubordination charge. And I feel like this is a hill I have to die on, but I also feel like it probably is for the agency too. Because if they were to say, you know what, Greg, let's just let bygones be bygones and come back to work, maybe they feel like they would lose like their teeth as an authority figure over their officers, you know?
Oh, you think they feel backed into a corner as well?
Yeah.
Which I find also a little bit interesting because you weren't actually speaking about your department.
No, I wasn't speaking about the port at all.
Yeah, you said nothing pejorative or even really specific about that department. So I wonder why they would think that that's their hill to die on as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But man, I tell you what, like, I never thought that this would rise to the level that it has risen to. And because of the stance that the port took, I mean, officers get fired all the time for insubordination charges, right? But based on this being a result from the video, they are getting hammered.
I saw one of your follow-ups saying that the 911 call centers were getting flooded.
800 calls a day of people voicing their displeasure on how this situation's playing out.
So you have to assume that that's probably going to the government. You know what I mean? There's probably other cascading effects or other organizations that have you heard anything about that from people that work outside of just the port, or how the state is their thoughts on it?
No, I haven't heard any details on it. I just know that the amount of support that's been coming in has been overwhelming, and a lot of it's appreciated, but some of it's like, all right, chill, guys. You know what I mean? Like,
we're getting the tanks.
Yeah, keeping the 911 line plugged up for hours and hours at a time.
That's probably not a solid.
Not a good plan, you know.
What's the response been from officers, like the guys that you? I mean, obviously we can keep it. I don't want any specifics from departments or anything like that, but in general, the officers that are reaching out to you.
So officers nationwide have been hitting me up, and it's been incredible. Like, so much positive feedback from them. And, there's a couple that's like, hey, dumbass, that's what you get for violating policy. But you know what I mean? It's like, I put right and wrong before policy. You know, it's just, I think that's how you should operate as a man. But, like, I had a guy from NYPD hit me up, and he's like, hey, bro, I want to let you know that every officer in my beat or my section, whatever, has watched your video, and it resonated with us. It's made us reflect, and it's literally changed the culture on the streets. He goes, 1 8-minute video has changed the culture. And it's like, I never thought anything like that. I'd ever receive anything like that, you know?
Yeah, that's a powerful
It's fucking
statement.
cool, man. It's real powerful. And it's...
and it seems like that was the intended and expressed point of the video.
That was the whole point of it. So it's like, you know what? If I end up losing my job over this, if I did, in fact, make some changes and make officers look inward and change some ways that they're approaching these problems, that's a fucking win, you know?
Yeah. How much leeway do officers have? Let's say New York City as an example. I mean, they're pretty restrictive in their lockdown. It seems externally. I mean, obviously we're not there. An officer is told, to keep people out of public spaces. Do they have any choice in whether or not they actually go and action that?
I would think that they would.
But if they didn't, so like if they didn't go action it, wouldn't that also fall back under insubordination?
Maybe.
Because they're being told to do something and they're not?
It depends on how their chain of command interprets it and how they want you to move forward with it and what orders you're operating under. But in law enforcement, you have something called discretion. And discretion is a powerful tool as a police officer. And in Washington State, there is only a couple laws. It's like domestic violence assault. Okay, you shall arrest that person because we can't allow that person. We can't walk away from that incident and allow that abusive person to still be with that victim because it's been proven time and time again that that's a super dangerous, volatile situation, right? So you shall arrest that person. Also, it's like your second DUI offense. You shall. It's like you can't walk away from something that's going to put the public
at risk,
at an inherent risk. But 99% of the other laws, you have what's called discretion. And if someone's like, hey, this is why this happened, okay, let me explain the circumstances to you. And there's a lot of shit that happens that where like, okay, on its surface, yes, a crime was committed and I could arrest you for that. But if I listen to you explain everything that's happening, okay, as a person, I don't feel comfortable citing this person. Like, let's say, and I don't run fucking speed traps because I hate that. I've always hated running traffic. It's not my bag. But let's say I stop someone going 90 miles an hour down I-5, right? Okay, well, he broke, that's an infraction. Mm-hmm. It happened. It's not up for debate whether it happened or not. But I pull him over, I walk up to his car, and he's like, my fucking son just fell out of his treehouse. He has a compound fracture and he's bleeding and I'm trying to get him to Harborview. Get the fuck out of here. I'll run code for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so even though someone may be violating something, sometimes there's a reason for that. And that's why we're afforded discretion,
How do they articulate that discretion? Is that something, I'm assuming they start talking about that in the academy because people could apply discretion in a very unequal manner across 10 people, right? Like how do you...
Well, and that is where it comes into hiring the right people because you learn very quickly that you do have a lot of power and you have the ability that can literally change people's lives based on the choice that I make as an officer. And I mean,
or what you write down.
Yeah. Or what I write down. And it's kind of scary sometimes because I remember so I got a call, a guy was flying in from Vietnam and they found some oxycodone in his bag, right? And only a few pills of it, not like he obviously wasn't trying to run drugs or distribute or sell, none of that stuff. And I start talking to him and I'm like, so what's the situation here? And he was in his 70s. He had all these medical conditions. He had like diabetes and gout. And he's like, yeah. I'm saying, and he was coming from Vietnam and he's like, I just go to the pharmacy. I can just buy this in Vietnam. This is what I use to manage the pain. And this was when I was like a brand new officer and I was like, okay, well, oxycodone's illegal here.
Yeah.
What do I, this is definitely a crime.
What do you do?
But come on, it's pretty apparent what's going on here. And so I called my sergeant and I said, I don't feel comfortable like trying to go after this guy or get him in trouble or arrest him. But at the same time, if I just let a dude walk out with oxycodone, and is that on me now? Am I going to get in trouble? And the sergeant said to me, he goes, Greg, what do you want to do? He goes, what feels right in your heart? And I said, what feels right in my heart is to let this old sick man go, explain to him the law, and I can confiscate those whatever amount of pills and put him in for destruction. But I don't feel like anyone should be getting in trouble for this. And he goes, that's exactly how I feel. And he goes, that's why we afford you discretion, because you need to take they call it the totality of the circumstances in law enforcement and then make a decision on what's the right thing to do. And that's certainly hemming that guy up. And my partner that was with me, he's like, hey, we got to make this arrest, man. That's illegal. And I was like, slow down, dude. So
sounds like a very black and white partner. And
like they call it in the military and law enforcement, like the sniff test. Like, yeah, it doesn't it's just something doesn't smell right here. And so you have to dig a little deeper. And most situations, you're allowed to use your discretion as a law enforcement officer.
It sounds like an awesome sergeant that you called.
Yeah, it was good, man. And that was a good learning point for me. And
Yeah.
I've used my discretion a lot, you know?
The friends that I have, you know, it's probably one of my best friends here in the Valley. He's got the most disarming personality, and he has the ability to talk to people. And I think because of that, he can get people to open up, and it allows him to be more powerful with that discretion.
Yeah.
Because you do have to break through that barrier of like, you know, I'm going to get everybody's like white knuckling straight ahead. They're just like, how fast are you? Like, I don't know. You know, like they're.
No, it's funny, man. I got a few tools that I use when I'm interacting with people, when I have to interview them or when I pull them over. I introduce myself by my first name. I say, hey, my name's Greg. I'm a police officer for the Port of Seattle. Instead of like coming at them as an authority figure, my name's Officer Anderson. Like, what the fuck? I'm not an that's not me. Officer is a title that pays my bills. That's my job. That's my professional title. But when I'm talking to you as a human being, I'm Greg. And I think that it's important for officers to remember, like, dude, don't take the humanity out of your job. Because as soon as you connect with someone, and even if it's a criminal case, even if it's someone that you're arresting, like if you come at someone like some hard ass, he might be a bigger hard ass than you. And now you have a fucking problem. Whereas if you give him a little bit of respect, like it goes a long ways. And I mean, I worked as a deputy in LA for a long time, so I got to see the gang culture. And bro, I tell you what, man, like you treat those guys like human beings. You're literally kicking their door in at fucking 6 a.m. and dragging them out of their house in cuffs. But if you just give them a little dignity, your job's 100 times easier.
Yeah, and I bet the way with which they react to you is completely opposite as well.
Yep. Straight up, man. It's the gang culture and the criminal culture as a whole, like it's a lot of people. Their whole life is just a revolving door of jail. They don't have a lot of shit to their name. So the thing that they do have is their dignity and their respect. And so you give them that. Unless they put you in a situation where you should take it.
Yeah, they're not deserving of it. Yeah,
and then you have to know when and where, just like anything, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Fuck, man. The job you have is so, from an outsider's perspective, it seems almost and often as if it's a no-win.
It is a no-win. There's a lot of times that like, and again, like working at the port, we don't deal with a lot of residential stuff.
What does that mean, working at the port? Like, what's the difference between that?
The Port of Seattle is a corporation, right? It's a for-profit corporation. It's not a municipality. And so they have like the cruise ship terminals. They have the airport. They have the waterfront properties.
Is this all down by SeaTac?
Yeah, it's SeaTac and around the Seattle area, right? And they have marinas. And so we don't typically deal with the type of patrol level officer calls that say like Seattle PD would, where it's like drunk asshole in his house that wants to fight you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it is a lot. I mean, it's dramatically less than a municipality. And I'm grateful for that because the truth is, dude, it's exactly what you said. I think patrol officers are put in no-win situations very often because you're presented with a problem that you have to come up with a solution in real time, and then you're going to be scrutinized for it afterwards. And that's a daily occurrence. And talk about stress, man. And that's why you hear like, I mean, I don't know if this is well known outside of law enforcement, but it's commonly understood in the law enforcement world that you will fucking die within 5 years of retirement.
I have heard that stat,
because
actually. It's heart disease that
you have had
isn't it?
cortisol pumping through your veins for 20 years. You know, it's like...
Well, you're responding to people's worst moments all day long.
Yeah.
I say this relatively often. You know, you guys aren't... Nobody calls 911 to be like, dude, I have got to tell you.
Yeah, you're fucking amazing.
I just won the lottery. Get your ass over here. We got a keg. We're getting ready to tap it.
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's like, there's somebody breaking into my house. I'm in a violent confrontation with fill in the blank.
Yep.
Murder, you know, like suicide, you know, like all of those things. Like that's...
So, yeah, it's a lot of dark shit.
Yeah.
And then it's also a lot of bullshit. Like, you know, I got a call, like a call that comes to mind as a girl's like, someone broke into my car and stole all my oxycodone. And I said, yeah, okay. So, well, luckily there's a camera right there, and I'm going to look and see who broke into your car.
Did it look like her?
And if nobody fucking showed up, we're going to have a different conversation. And she's like, oh, it was actually on my boat. I think it was on my boat. And I'm like, God, dude. So we're put in a position where I know exactly what's going on. But I also don't get to make medical calls on what prescriptions should be refilled versus what shouldn't be refilled, you know?
Yeah.
So I called her doctor and just said, hey, this is a situation. I don't believe her at all. And because he told her, I can't refill your prescription without a police report saying that it was stolen. So, yeah, you're put in a weird situation, you know?
That whole thing, what you just described sounds very weird to me.
Yeah. But police officers get calls like that all the time. All day, every day.
People want a police... because they're probably burning through it at a faster rate.
They're burning through it. Yeah, exactly.
Or selling, I would imagine.
Yeah, or selling. Or we get police reports all the time for stolen items. Oh, my insurance company said I needed to make a report on my stolen laptop. Yeah, okay, explain the circumstances to me. And you just know it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's not what cops signed up to do. It's just to help fucking criminals continue to scam the system.
Yeah.
But if you can't prove it, guess what you got to do? You got to take their theft report and you got to write it up and you got to put all the shit in the system.
Regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah, and it takes you an hour and a half and it's just a bunch of bullshit. And so, like, the law enforcement as a career, it's a weird career.
Are you glad you went down that path?
I'm happy that I went down it, for sure. But as I'm seeing how this all plays out, it's going to be time to move on. You know, like I told you on the ride over here, I've been hit up by tens of departments in Washington State and hundreds around the country that are like, hey, if you end up getting terminated, you can come to work with us for the next day.
Would you want to?
No. To tell you the truth, no. Well, I mean, I don't want to close any doors yet. I got to see where I find myself. But I'm hopeful that an opportunity will arise from this where I can chase something that's a little more meaningful to me and a little more like a less stressful lifestyle, I would say. You know, like guys like us that lived high stress for a long time, like I'm happy to be hanging out with my kids and playing guitar and doing jiu-jitsu, you know? And if I could find some source of income that was based in positivity and having positive interactions with people, I think that would just be a game changer for just life overall, you know?
Yeah. What do you think people right now, specifically to the bizarre environment or the challenging environment that changes by state, like Montana is, I believe, in phase 2 of reopening. New York, I think, is still complete lockdown. LA, I think they're extending until August. What can people, the civilian what can they do to help law enforcement?
Man, that's a tough one because obviously if they just obeyed 100%, they wouldn't have any run-ins with law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
But the other side of that coin is
they're obeying something potentially infringing on their constitutional rights. Yeah.
People like that lady that owns a salon in Texas. She's like, I literally have kids that I need to feed. That's why I'm here, you know? And so I feel like if you're put in a situation where on one hand you're asked to obey an order, on the other hand I got kids to take care of, we know what route people are going to take.
Yeah. They don't actually have a choice.
They don't have a choice. And so I think it's incumbent on law enforcement officers to realize that, like, these people aren't being defiant. These people aren't trying to shit on your mayor or your governor. Half of these people are literally living their life the best way that they know how to. And you can't shit on them for that. You can't trample on their liberties. And I think government as a whole, I think it's our job to educate and give people the opportunity to do the right thing. If you, whatever you believe that to be, but I don't think that we have the right to take enforcement on this. So if officers want to be like, hey, like, it's a citywide ordinance to have a mask on, we'd appreciate it, and go at them with kindness and be like, you know what, we'll even provide one.
Yeah.
And I'm not here telling you what to do. I'm not gonna deprive you of your freedoms if you don't do it. But as a community, this is kind of the path that we've determined to be the safest and most effective. We'd really appreciate it if you'd put a mask on. I would like to see how much more often that would work than put your fucking mask on or or you're going to jail. Like that girl in the New York subway last week. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't. What happened?
It's the worst one I've seen yet, man.
Oh, no.
She's walking, holding her hand of like a 3 or 4 year old child, and they're like, "Hey, where's your mask?" And like,
This is the police saying
yeah,
this?
it's like 7 or 8 officers surround her, and she's like, tries to walk away, and then they push her back, and then they dogpile her because she was trying to walk away without putting a mask on. And it's like, you can't do that to someone. You assaulted a young mother while her child watched. Like, it's disgusting to me. And
So how does that happen? Like, explain that to me.
I think it's just mob mentality. If one of those officers was like a guy like us that could just step up and be like, "Hey guys, relax, okay? This is a 22-year-old woman with a young child. Everyone fucking relax. We don't need to be screaming at her. We don't need to be putting our hands on her. If she doesn't want to obey the city ordinance, everybody's going to be a lot better off if she just walks away than if we get in a fucking physical altercation with 8 officers. Someone needs to step up and be willing to say that. But I think a lot of officers are reluctant.
I just can't imagine with that many people there that it would be allowed to escalate. I don't understand that. I guess I would describe it as a non-linear escalation.
Yeah.
Like, what threat is that?
And there's no threat. In the use of force continuum that we are taught as officers, you have to be able to articulate a threat. I
Yeah.
can't tase you unless I'm in fear of some type of harm.
What
I
if you
can't
just-
shoot you.
What if you just enjoy tasing people?
Yeah, those people exist. I can't shoot you unless I'm in fear of loss of life or grave bodily injury. Like, there's things I have to articulate. I can't put my hands on someone because they don't want to listen to the words of the mayor. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how this country's legal system is structured, but it just happened overnight. And I'll tell you, I mean, like, I got a retired CAG buddy. I shouldn't even put this out here, but whatever. He watched that video and he goes, "Bro, if I was standing there, there'd have been 5 dead cops." And that's a guy that is highly capable.
and has respect for those officers.
And has respect
too.
for officers. But when he watched a young woman getting assaulted, he's like, he goes, as a man, there's lines that I draw, and that line was crossed. And I couldn't have stood by and let that happen. And I'm telling you, man, that's a situation that's going to happen. And I'm actually fucking shocked that it hasn't happened
already.
yet. You know?
How do you change that inside of an organization? How do you change that mentality inside of a group of? Well, first off, what the fuck were 8 officers doing right next to each other like that?
Yeah,
That
I
seems
know.
like a
Yeah.
drastic overuse of individuals in one little location. But is that an institutional thing? Is that an issue of that people are wearing a badge so that they therefore demand compliance? Is it a lack of training? Is it a combination of all
I was going
that?
to say, I think it's a combination of everything. A lot of officers think that people should listen to them because they're officers. But what people want to listen to is well-articulated, well thought out messages that come from the heart. And if they would just talk to people like you talk to your kids, or like you talk to your sister, like address people with
My sister
that.
and I don't always get along.
Yeah, you know what? Mine either. I love her, but yeah, we go at it sometimes.
We might have the dog pile if we go that direction.
But I think that's what the public deserves. And I think there needs to be a 2-tiered approach to this. I think people in high positions, and you've been seeing it this last week, and I don't want to take credit for it, but there is a movement happening where sheriffs of entire counties are like, I will not ask my deputies to enforce orders.
Right here.
See?
That's a conversation I had with my buddy yesterday.
And it's happened in some counties in Washington. And I think these messages need to start from the top, because if you as a sheriff or a chief put that out, that holds a lot of weight. That takes a lot of stress off of your guys, because it's like, okay,
They're backstopped.
I'm good now. Okay, yeah, you got me. But the other side of the coin is you don't get to rely on that. If you're an individual officer and you don't have support from your chain of command, you still got to do the right thing. You still have to.
Yeah.
And that's where people are starting to find themselves in weird situations where they're having to balance, hey, this is my career versus this is what I feel is right in my heart. But I would say that if something doesn't feel right in your heart, you don't even get to weigh that and look at that from 2 different perspectives. The answer is crystal clear, and it's right in front of you, you know? And not to go off on a tangent about like the political aspect of this, but I can tell you, at least in Washington State, I closed my jiu-jitsu gym down on March 13th, a week before it was mandated.
You know what? I think you might have just named the exact date that the one here closed as well. They did before it was shut down.
And I did that because I felt like people that were smarter than me were saying, hey, this is serious shit.
Yeah.
Right? This could be potentially a cause of tens of millions of deaths.
That's right.
Right?
The March numbers were going to be piling bodies in the streets.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like I told my jiu-jitsu team, I said, listen, guys, we're going to take 10 days off just to kind of analyze the facts as they come in. 10 days off of jiu-jitsu will be a fucking blessing in disguise. All your aches and pains can heal up for a week and a half, right?
The best jiu-jitsu meme I've ever seen, it was at a sunset, and there was a wheelchair that was empty and a man standing there, and he's like, 2 weeks off.
Yeah, that's exactly right, But in order for your chain of command, and this is military, law enforcement, government officials, in order for your chain of command's requests or orders to resonate with you, they have to have credibility, right? And it wasn't a week into this thing when I looked at what Washington State declared essential versus non-essential. And you can just go down the list.
Yeah.
Liquor stores, essential. Marijuana, essential. And I'm pro all of that stuff. You do whatever you want to do, right?
Yeah. Is marijuana legal?
It is.
Okay,
Yep.
Washington. Yep.
Vehicle auto licensing, essential. The lottery, essential.
Target.
Yeah.
Walmart.
Yes. Government contracted construction, essential. Private contracted construction, non-essential.
Small businesses,
So yeah,
non-essential.
you started to see, it was crystal clear that anything that padded the government's pockets was conveniently deemed essential. And as soon as you understand, like, okay, they're keeping everything open that makes them money. Now, you're not looking out for people's safety. You could give a shit about people's safety. And that was one of the first things that started to make me look at this kind of cross-eyed and be like, what's really going on here? Because if this is as contagious and as dangerous as you're saying it is, then there's one or two things happening. Either it's not, or you have a disregard for people's safety in businesses that make you money. Either one of those things is fucking despicable. And so I just think people are looking at the big picture of everything that's happening with the coronavirus thing, and they're losing more and more faith in their government, and government officials, their credibility is starting to become shot with this. And that's why people are like, you know what? I'm not fucking sitting in my house anymore. I'm going to go surfing.
And I think a lot of people looked at government officials as a shaky foundation to begin with.
Absolutely. And that's something that they've earned over the years.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, government's become a weird thing because on its surface, it was supposed to be about public service. But let's face it, it's not about public service anymore. It's about power. And I feel like as soon as you look at your service in a method that's going to gain you personal power, you're in it for the wrong reasons. Like in the military, how often do we talk about like the guys that should be promoted and the guys that should be fucking leading teams and leading platoons? A lot of times they're guys that don't want that.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the opposite of what they want.
It's the opposite of what they want.
Yeah.
I fucking didn't take the sergeant's board when I was in 2nd Battalion. I'm like, I don't want to fucking promote. And as soon as we landed in Afghanistan, my platoon sergeant called me in his office. He says, guess what, Greg? I was just approved a combat promotion to sergeant. There's nothing you can say about it. You're getting Alpha 3-1. That's your team. Go. And I was like, damn it. He got me.
Son of a bitch.
And that's to a point where my whole life I've always felt like stepping up and taking that next step to where I'm in charge of other human beings. It's always been kind of weird for me. But when I've been forced to be in leadership positions, it's something that I've always enjoyed too. So, I mean, we can go off on a leadership tangent for another hour, but
it's important, dude. We can go wherever we want to go.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. Well, when I was an E5 shooter, I thought that there was no other job on earth for me. I was like, this is unbelievable. I have a gun and a shotgun to get in any door that I want to, and breaching charges and grenades and a lot of bullets, and this is amazing. And then, my last deployment I did in 2010, I was in a leadership position, and I was more stressed out than I've ever been because I was so concerned with making a decision that was going to hurt somebody else. I think if I were to reduce all of my worry down to one thing, it was really that I would not be prepared or capable, and I would say or do something stupid and somebody else would suffer for it. but it was so rewarding to see the growth in the people that were underneath me.
Yeah.
That it actually exceeds the enjoyment of being the E5 shooter. If you would have told me that when I was an E5 shooter, I'd have been like,
Yeah.
go pack sand and get the fuck out of my way. But yeah, I mean, leadership is tough, man. It's and that's why I asked you, like, what can people do to help? It's, you know, a lot of times people will phrase it like, well, you know, what can the cops do to help us? It's like, no, well, what can we do is this, you know, people forget you take the badge off. You know, like you were 3 on, 4 off. You're you know what I mean?
Just a dude, you know?
I mean, the difference being that I have no doubt that most cops, even on their off days, if something were to happen, they're going to dive in and try to do the right thing, as they should, as I think actually everybody should, regardless if you have. I tell you what, though, that's not the culture that I see. Here's what I see when shit's going down.
Yeah, I know. It's gross.
It's
gross.
I've only one time involved myself with police, and it was to help a guy who made a terrible tactical decision to get an open door. He was trying to get an incredibly hammered woman out of a car. So open door so he couldn't escape on the far side. Drunk woman, massive drunk dude. He was the delicious center of an Oreo. They were both hammered. And I ended up getting into a scuffling match. This is before I started doing jiu-jitsu, but I still was able to get a nice guillotine, and it was good. Just didn't know what I was doing. I went with the full – it was more of a crank than a choke.
There you go. Sometimes those are worse.
Yeah, I love that. It's just more of a crank than a choke. I'm like, did you tap, motherfucker?
That's their last little jab to try and maintain some dignity.
Oh, I say it too, though. I try to like people be like, "Was it a crank or a choke?" I'm like, a little bit of neither. Just it's like, yeah. I mean, you got to have some fun. But as that was happening, I looked up, and there were people there holding their phones, and it's like, what? Like, I just don't understand that. I feel 100% compelled to step in that environment. And I'll be honest with you, if I was there and those cops, just like your buddy, I would feel compelled to help that person too, because the cops were in the wrong.
Yeah. No, and I think you should feel compelled to stand up for what's right as a man. I think 2 huge things that need to be addressed, and we could do a whole nother podcast on this, but like sound leadership has the potential to change the culture of organizations and corporations and so on. And like, obviously, look at Jocko. He's killing it.
Yeah.
Teaching people sound leadership principles.
That is generations old.
Yes.
The stuff that he is talking about was taught to me through the generation before me, which was taught to them through the generation. It's not like...
It's not rocket science.
It's not.
No.
I think it goes all the way back to the time that people picked up sticks and stones. Like, and another thing is, you know, people think that there's military leadership and outside of the military leadership, and there's not.
Nope, there's not.
There's good leadership, which is effective, and bad leadership, which is ineffective. And I say this when I talk at organizations about leadership. I've been fortunate to see and be around the most powerful ordinance on the face of the earth, and I loved it. But leadership trumps that firepower by a magnitude of order, and it's generational, and it can change organizations. And you just see people just turning a blind eye or going the other direction, and I don't understand it.
I think the other aspect that the American culture needs right now is to learn to manage fear. I think everybody is afraid, and it's exactly like what you just said. You're watching somebody get assaulted, and people are filming it instead of getting involved.
And they're filming it because they know something's going on that is noteworthy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whether or not they can determine which one they.
And why don't they want to get involved?
They're scared.
Because they're scared. It's as simple as that. They're scared for their own personal safety, or they're scared they're going to get in trouble, or they're scared they're going to get hurt. And I think, and I touched on this in one of my videos, is like, I came to terms as a very young man that my belief system may cost me everything up into my life. Like when you're deploying to Afghanistan or Iraq, like I would commonly think like there's a good chance this is the last time I see American soil.
Yeah.
You know? And you have to learn to overcome that fear. And as soon as you do, it's like you're fucking set free. It's like the stress of fear can just tear you apart.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in myself overseas to where it's like, once you come to terms with like, okay, listen, I'm not going to make stupid decisions. I'm not going to be reckless. I'm going to try and stay alive. But But if they fucking get me, they get me. And I have to understand that that's a reality of the game that I'm playing.
And you actually have no control over that.
Exactly.
And and this is easier said than done, but detaching yourself and realizing that you can't control the outcome and the only thing that you can control is yourself.
Yep.
That's actually what's going to keep you alive. Fear of death, I try to explain this to people, fear of death is not what keeps you alive. It actually could shorten your life faster than anything.
Yeah.
Because you're getting shot at, so you take a knee behind cover and you're like, fuck, I know I need to move, but I'm scared.
Yep.
And while you're sitting there paralyzed, your enemy is button hooking around you. The next thing you know, you're in a complicated ambush instead of a linear one, and you're fucksville.
And the thing that I always say about when I'm talking about combat with people, it's like, if someone's shooting at you, the only way to shoot back is to be able to identify where they're at and get in a position where you can see them and engage them. And if you can engage them, guess what? They can engage you. But that's part of the game. But if you just hunker behind a wall and cower, exactly what you said.
You're going to get maneuvered on.
You're
going to
get maneuvered
destroyed.
on.
Yeah.
And
it's fear, though, that keeps you behind that wall.
Absolutely.
And it's and I'll be the first to tell you, like, it's easier said than done.
It is. It's funny too, because it's a trained skill. It's something that you maintain, because when I was in Ramadi for those 2 years, it got to the point, RPG shot at you, it didn't even register. Like, oh, that one didn't hit the vehicle. Cool, man.
Which is probably also not a safe headspace.
No, you're right, you know? And then we got attacked in Baghdad like years later, and it was that year that I was in Erbil, right? And dude, you don't even hear a gunshot in Erbil.
I've heard that. I mean, it's pretty far up north, right?
It's way up north
Yeah.
in the Kurdish area. You can go to the mall. You can go out to dinner and stuff. It's not even Iraq. It's bizarre.
There's an Instagram account from Erbil, and it's got it shows like luxury pool. It's pretty crazy, actually. A buddy of mine showed it to me. I wish I could remember the name, but there's an Instagram influencer in Erbil, Iraq.
I wonder if it's the Sheridan. That's like the big
Maybe,
fancy
yeah.
place there. But so we were at Erbil for like a year. And then I shot down to Baghdad for just a couple days for some detail. I don't remember what we were doing. And dude, a mortar hit right outside of my bedroom and shattered the windows, and all the glass flew in. And I fucking hit the ground and got that huge adrenaline dump and was like, and I was like, oh, you fucking lost it. Because that shit you didn't even used to register when that kind of stuff happened, you know? So like facing your fear and managing it, it's an ongoing process for sure.
I think if I had to throw out a hypothesis, I think that is probably why you and I enjoy jiu-jitsu the way that we do.
It's a huge tool. And I know we're always going to circle the conversation back to jiu-jitsu.
But there's a reason why I kick myself in the ass for not starting it and being so resistant. I literally was resistant because my friends told me that it was awesome. And fuck you, because you don't get to. You're not the boss of me. You don't get to tell me how to have fun. But then I think about it, I'm like, why do I like it? There's a huge essence of unknown. Both parties have a vote. There's a skill component. There's a physical component, a mental component, a ton of variables. You have to face, how are you going to act when you lose? How are you going to act when you win? And the long term, and it's all this incremental exposure that adds up over time, which is the same thing about learning how to control fear. And the biggest point I try to make to people is it's okay to be afraid, but don't let fear drive your decision-making process.
Yeah, you have to manage it.
You have to manage it. If it's managing you, then you need to stand by because you're on a ship to I don't know where.
Well, and I mean, in jiu-jitsu, you can see that taking place in real time. Like I always tell my students, part of training is learning to find comfort in uncomfortable situations.
Of which there seems to be a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, you got a guy that has neon face or neon belly. So you're in pain. Your
neon
ribs
face
hurt.
is probably more painful, but like neon eye socket.
Yeah. You can't breathe. You can't move. So your primitive responses start firing up and it's fight or flight, right? And it's like, okay, well, now I can't get away from this guy and I can't beat him in a fight. So all the bells and whistles are going off saying this is death. And even though it's your friend and you're in a training environment, that can cause fucking straight panic.
Oh, yeah. Then maybe they want to do like a low neon belly where their gi just starts smothering your face too. So now you're choking to death or suffocating to death.
And so if you can train yourself out of allowing yourself to be afraid or feel that like uncomfortableness or that anxious response, like when I'm at my top And I'm not there anymore because I'm not rolling with guys that are kicking the shit out of me all the time. But when I was, I remember like no matter how bad I was getting my ass kicked, no matter how bad it was, I was like, I could calmly think, okay, this sucks. I fucking hate this. What do I have to do next to get out of this position? And you could calmly and rationally go through the problem-solving process. Whereas you do that to a brand new guy, he starts flopping around like a fish.
Oh, yeah.
Burns through all his energy. His heart rate spikes, and he's going to be combat ineffective in about 20 seconds.
And think of, though, the power of being able to get to that point that regardless of the external pressure or pain that's being applied to you, you can think rationally. There is a direct, in my opinion at least, overlay into the business world, that helps your decision-making ability regardless of what it is that you do. It's got to be able to help in a law enforcement environment, right? Because it's, things suck, but that's okay because I can still use my brain the way that it was designed to, which in my opinion is objective reasoned thought. I
think jiu-jitsu plays a huge role in the professional world, the business world, not only for the reasons that you just stated, but also just your confidence as a man when you're dealing with another man. Because now, like, if my supervisor's pissed off at me about something, okay, what are you pissed off about?
How far do you want to take this with the verbal argument?
Yeah, I'm not intimidated by you at all.
Yeah.
So let's just, and it was funny during my investigation for this video, they told me several times when we were talking about it, they're like, we don't want to be like intimidating or scare you. And I was like, let's just get something out of the way right now. There's no one in this room that can fucking scare me. And I'm not saying that to be tough guy. I'm just saying these are the facts, okay? We'll discuss what happened, but I'm not intimidated by anybody in this room. And I feel like once you don't allow other men to intimidate you in a professional career, dude, the sky's the limit. Because I would see like bully supervisors talking to people a certain way. Well, guess what? They don't talk to me that way. And why is that?
Because they know.
Because they fucking know.
Yeah. And why? In my experience, the most vocal bullies are the ones who are generally the least capable.
Yep, of course.
And they're like that because they're trying to buffer and buttress the lack of actual capacity.
Exactly right.
That they don't have.
And so jiu-jitsu is definitely a big fear mechanism that I use to constantly hone that skill. The other thing that I do is my ice tub, man. I'm big into that thing. You probably never want to go in cold water again.
No, I
right?
hate water. The only ice that is acceptable, or the only form of water that is acceptable to me, is ice in a cocktail glass.
That's hilarious. My other team guy buddies are like, I'd never get in your fucking tub. You're an idiot.
I've
dude.
done it, and it just sucks. And I'm like, I'll go find a different way to like do my daily suffering or suck. Like I need to eat 12 donuts. That sucks. I'll just do that instead of
just fucking.
Oh no, they had those. They totally redid the gym on the West Coast, and it was great. And they had contrast baths. They had the ice tubs and then the hot one. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get in both. Nah, I'm just gonna get in the hot one. Just go and spend 20 minutes in the hot one instead. It was, I'm not a fan of that.
I'm not a fan of it really, either. While I'm in there, but that's why I do it. Like it's a big part of my life is getting in the ice water consistently, because you look at it and you're like, everything in your mind's like, ugh, I really don't want to do this. But sometimes just forcing yourself to do shit you don't want to do is what it's all about.
Did you just buy like a big freezer at Costco?
So, I went to Lowe's and I actually got in the different ones. I got a picture of it, bro. I'm sitting in the different
staff is
freezers.
probably like, oh God.
Yeah, what's this guy? What do you need to fit a body in your freezer for? And I caulked all the seams with silicone, and then put Flex Seal tape over it, so the whole thing was waterproofed.
Okay.
And then I put like 2 or 3 bags of Epsom salt in it, so now you can get the temperature down to like 29 degrees.
Which is, there's no need to do that. So do you actually have it plugged in and that sucker's just cranking?
Yeah, I plug it in, and I'll leave it plugged in until I get like 2 or 3 inches of ice on the surface, and then just break it up with a sledgehammer. I fucked up a couple times though and forgot it was plugged in. The whole thing just turns into a solid block.
No, yeah, that's going to be a few days.
Yeah,
probably thought
it's like a few weeks.
Oh, is it really?
Well, because it's insulated,
Pour some hot water in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn. So what does it look like next for you, man?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say.
Any estimation on timeline and when it will take for this to solidify or finalize?
No. I mean, I was told because it's an insubordination charge and that it's pretty black and white, that the investigation will go quicker than most, because a lot of times when cops get in trouble, there's a lot of moving parts and whatnot. This whole investigation boils down to me saying, no, I'm not fucking doing that. So it's pretty cut and dry, but as far as the timeline, I haven't been told exactly when to expect what, other than it's going to be termination. I was told that. And, you know, and this is crazy to say, but there's a part of me that's almost like, all right, I get to choose a new adventure now. Like,
I get that for sure.
Like maybe, I mean, I don't know. I'm not one of those big everything happens for a reason guys, but this has kind of felt like it. You know? I've had so many opportunities opened up to me in the last week that I don't think I'm going to have any problems finding something in the private sector that can support my family.
What would you do if they came to you and they're like, you know what, Greg, we fucked up and we're not going to pursue an insubordination charge? And the choice became yours at this point as to whether or not to continue or to leave on your own?
You know, and I've said this openly, if they were to do that, they could count on me being at work on Sunday morning. Like, that's when my shift starts, you know?
Yeah.
And even if that were to happen and other opportunities did open up through this, would I end up leaving law enforcement? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would shake out. But no, I wanted to keep that in the open that, yeah, if they would just say, hey, you know what? It's all good and put it behind us. I'm good with that too. And I'm not going to hold grudges or be like, oh, this person's a dick and I can't believe you did that. Like, cause as you know, man, like in any type of operational setting, you can't have that stuff. And if there were grudges held and they were pissed off at me, like it's going to be time to go regardless if I'm fired or not. If there's any of that energy, it's time to go.
It would be an insidious, cancerous relationship that would be bad. At
the end of the day, as a law enforcement officer, you always have to think worst case scenario. And I don't dwell on worst case scenario, but there's always a possibility of being in a questionable shoot or questionable use of force. A dude pulls a phone out and you thought it was a gun and you shot him. Like that shit happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so in order to do this job, and I don't know how people do it with agencies that they don't 100% believe have your back, but that's mandatory for me. I need to know that my chain of command's in my corner, you know?
How often does the chain of command rotate out in those organizations?
You know, the chief's position can be like a 3-5 year position. And then sergeants can be indefinite. There's guys that have been sergeants for 10 years.
Yeah.
And the sergeant level that's who you're interacting with on a regular basis as your boss. Like if you're dealing with a commander, so it goes sergeant, commander, and then to a chief.
Yeah.
And you're not really interacting with commanders on much, you know? So, but it's very common to work for the same sergeant. Like I've been with the same one for 2 years now. So,
what was your favorite thing, or what is your favorite thing about being a cop?
You know, it's funny. It's like my favorite thing about being a cop is when something fucked up happens and you get that big adrenaline dump and you get to go do what most people think is police work, you know? Like I say, we had a guy drop from a heart attack who was dead and I was able to revive him. And like, that's a pretty cool feeling.
That's
like,
awesome.
I was at the right place at the right time and had the training. And I literally met him and his family like a couple months later. Like that kind of stuff is cool, you know? Or I had a guy that was like high on PCP, which I didn't even know there was still Seattle is meth and heroin. That's the drug of choice up there. That's the only time I've seen PCP.
I think that might be the same. Apparently Seattle is one of the source cities for where we're sitting right now.
Yes. Yeah. It's a shit show up there.
Yeah.
But he was driving around on PCP and like rammed into a pregnant lady and like some of my partners tried to barricade him in and he blew through the police barricade, like rammed their vehicles. And so I got to yard that guy out and tune him up and arrest him. And it's like fuck yeah, you know, like, but those things happen. That's the exception, not the rule. And dude, I'm almost 40. I don't want to be fighting dudes all the time anyways.
Yeah.
But when it does happen, it's a good time.
How was the Jiu-Jitsu versus PCP? Solid?
It's funny you say that because I've always told people, I'm like, listen, PCP and being high, it may give you superhuman strength and superhuman will.
Does it actually though? Because I don't know if I've ever encountered anything.
Well, I said, but it doesn't give you superhuman skill.
Oh, for sure.
It
you're
doesn't-
not going to smoke.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not going to turn into a
Dude,
black
this guy
belt.
was a 265-pound Samoan, and I fucking tuned his ass up like nothing. But I'm a trained fighter. You know what I mean? So that But no, he didn't feel like, not even for 1 second was it like, oh no. Like,
He didn't go pick up a squad car and smash you over the head with it?
Yeah.
Well, you hear these goddamn urban legends like, we tased him 37 times and he kept coming. It's like, fuck, man, what is this stuff?
Yeah, I haven't seen that stuff. You know, like.
That's awesome you were able to tune him up, though. That's a pretty big weight disadvantage, too.
Yeah, it was.
What'd you go with for your opening move?
Well, just a right cross. Like, hey, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, but when it's go time, it's go time, you know?
Nice. Did you guys transition to the ground shortly after that?
Yep.
Nice.
So, and it was funny,
awesome.
too, because, like, and it was good on my department because I tuned that guy up. Like,
Yeah.
to the point where, I mean, I broke his orbital and broke his nose in a couple spots. And I was like, oh, man, that was my first big use of force with this agency.
Yeah, how are they going to
Like
respond?
my last agency would have been like trying to, whoa, Anderson, what's going on here?
Even given the circumstances of...
You never know.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these agencies have to start weighing like liability, you know? And I got called into the chief's room, and the first thing he says, like, our department's grateful that you were the officer that responded because you were able to stop this psycho. And I was like, okay, good.
I got a buddy lives on the outskirts of Chicago. So he's a law enforcement officer, black belt in jiu-jitsu. He was like, narcotics, a bunch of time on SWAT, and kind of the same thing. Like they get certain calls and they're like, deploy the machine. And he would come over and tune it up and be like, what else? Do you guys have anything else for me? Like, you guys could also learn how to do these things yourself.
Do you want to hear the most asinine thing about this case is that this dude fought, I think it was 7 cops the night before.
Oh, man.
The night before. And King County is notorious for just, you book people in on charges and they release them. And so he got booked on fighting police officers the night before. They released him. Then he goes and gets high and gets in another fight with police officers. They release him the same day after I fought him too.
Really?
Yep. Can you fucking believe that? And see what that does for us as cops. It's like, dude, we're literally out there like risking your lives to detain this fucking psychopath that is wreaking havoc on a community. And then you just let him go the next day.
There's a huge disconnect there, and I don't see how you couldn't get tainted because I'd imagine you have a high percentage of what I'll call repeat offenders.
Oh, dude.
And if
Yeah.
you're constantly interfacing with that, how could that not taint you to the next interaction that you're going to come to?
Yeah, because it makes you ask yourself, like, again, like I've put like war and fucking violence like behind me for the most part, you know? And so when I find myself in a situation where I have to go back to that, like, okay, you go back to it, you handle business, and then you want it, and then it's over, right? And then you see that you went through what you went through, and then the prosecuting office doesn't give a shit. They're like, nope, we're going to send this guy back out. And knowing that another cop's going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And another cop's going to have to do that.
And it may not go well for that other cop.
No.
Or
And
it may not go well for that individual either. I mean,
no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know? So it's law enforcement's a weird thing, man, because you're trying to balance, obviously, the people's rights. You're trying to balance your own safety and your own morality. And then you're also trying to balance what your prosecutor is willing to prosecute. And I can tell you, 90% of our arrests, the prosecutors kick them and say, we're not taking that. We don't have the manpower and we're not interested. In Seattle, it's like 3 grams of heroin or under. They kick them and drop the charges.
Is that a large amount or a small amount?
I mean, it's a large enough amount that it's not, that's not just like one personal use thing.
Okay.
But at the same time, they say that there's so much heroin in Seattle that they can't prosecute on amounts that are under that because the whole system would get clogged up with drug charges. And I don't know if have you spent any time in Seattle?
Very briefly, and it was a long time ago.
Okay, so if you were to go there today, literally in the last 3 years, it's turned into an absolute shithole. There's drugs and homelessness and like petty thefts and vandalism and malmish, car prowls, and the shit on the sidewalks. The city is rotting from the inside.
Is that because they are so permissive with those people there?
Yeah, that's because
and their behavior?
they won't enforce any of the ordinances, the city ordinances of that you're not allowed to camp on the street.
Yeah.
Like if you or I went and camped on the street in Seattle, we'd get cited and told you can't fucking do that because we're normal, like responsible citizens, that if the law enforcement came up and told us that, we'd be like, oh, okay, I understand. And if we got a fine, we'd probably pay it, you know.
Yeah.
But they know these people are just so drugged out that nothing that they can say or do is going to resonate with them. So they've just decided to go to a hands-off approach. And bro,
I don't feel like that solves much.
it doesn't solve anything. Like it's so troublesome because they're like, well, we don't have any answers. But I ask people this: when in when in the history of mankind have we allowed an absolute tiny minority of the population to just absolutely rot and destroy and decay our cities from the inside? Like, never.
And what would you say? I mean, your profession is down there interfacing with that. You know, I was up in Vancouver, and a buddy of mine took me to Skid Row.
Okay, so yeah, same thing.
Fuck me. I just stood there. Mind you, I was on a corner of a street. Directly across the street from me was a pair of police officers. So they were watching the same thing that I was.
Yep.
And I watched a man who had a rubber syringe. It was the rubber tubing around his arm with a needle hanging out of his arm, just get up and decide to go finish shooting up across the street. People, you know, smoking, and like I don't know a whole lot about drug culture, but I saw more things there than I was able to describe. And it was completely in the open, completely permissive. And how does a city like that, or how does Seattle, how do you get out of that trench? How do you fill that trench up?
I mean, and again, like, there's people a lot smarter than me that are looking into this that haven't been able to come up with a solution. But you have to enforce drug laws, and you have to put these people into treatment. And like, yeah, I'm sure it would be overwhelming amount of money to do that. But if you look at the amount of money that's being sucked out of that city dealing with what they're doing, I mean, I don't see why they're not doing it.
My brother-in-law is a captain in the San Diego City Fire Department, and they were having to move homeless encampments on bridges to hose them down with the truck because of Hep A.
Yeah, they're bringing back the plague. Like, it's just the shit that you see as a police officer with these people, you realize it's not like, it's funny when people talk about homelessness. Like, it's not a guy that got laid off at Boeing and got evicted because he couldn't afford his mortgage. That person does not exist on the streets. The people that exist on the streets are people that have fucked over every single person in their life. They've burned every single bridge they've ever had. And the only thing that they care about is methamphetamine or heroin. And half of them, they've used so much that their brains are shot. I've seen shit that's like The Walking Dead. Like they'll like pull their pants down and shit all over, and then pick it up and put it in their pockets. Like stuff like that. Like,
I do that sometimes though too. I mean, we don't have to judge.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have a baggie.
Yeah.
And pockets or portable baggies on your pants.
You left your little blue baggies at home that day.
Well, what percentage of that is, you know, does mental health play into that as well too? I have to imagine that you're seeing some some people who are in the largest struggle of mental health that they're ever going to encounter.
And it's like the chicken or the egg thing. It's like, who knows if they had mental health problems that led them to drugs, or if drugs just rotted to their brain to the point where it doesn't function properly anymore.
Yeah, at some point it seems like
or there's probably both of those scenarios taking place.
I could not be a police officer. I could tell you that much, Greg. It's I don't know how you guys do it. To be honest,
the overwhelming majority of what we deal with on a daily basis as a patrol level officer is methamphetamine and heroin, and the thefts and the vandalism and the car prowls that are a direct result of that. It's absolutely nonstop in Seattle.
That's what I've heard described about this area too. So they will break in and find things. Firearms are one of the things that they like, is basically a currency, right? So they'll take it out of the city, trade it for a drug, and then the drug becomes the commerce back here. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you could change anything about the world that you're coming from, that law enforcement world, what would you change? If you were king for a day, you could make one sweeping change.
I mean, I think the biggest sweeping change that needs to happen right now, and even though we deal with, like I was just saying, like the majority of our calls are related to drugs and that drug culture, I think right now what needs to happen is for law enforcement officers to regain the trust of the average American citizen. And I think that needs to happen through how they interact with people and then their actions.
Yeah.
I think if you could change the culture of law enforcement and put law enforcement in the light that it used to be in, like people used to respect police officers. That used to be an admirable profession. And now
I think a lot of people still do. I think often the anomaly paints the norm, like the shitty New York situation.
Yeah.
I mean, how many police interactions do you think there are per day? There's got to be millions.
You're right.
But
I'm sure
New
the
York
overwhelming majority
Yeah.
are positive.
But that damn New York incident that you're talking about, which I haven't seen, but I guarantee you somebody in Wyoming watching that
Just saying, fuck the cops.
Well, if they get pulled over later in that day, whether they're consciously thinking about it or not, it's going to impact how they view the individual getting ready to walk up to their car.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of fear attached to officers now. And, like, I think a big thing that we need to do is, like, if you're in a bad shoot, if you make a bad decision and it costs someone their life, you need to be called out on that.
And you need to own
and
it
you need
yourself.
to own it.
Yeah.
And if that means you getting prosecuted, like, we don't get to just have bad shoots. If you and I walked down the street right now and had an AD and fucking shot someone in 7-Eleven, oh, no, it was an accident. Or
no, that's on me. Like, you got to ride that
that's
one
manslaughter.
to the end. Yeah.
You're going to get fucking arrested for that.
And you should.
And you should.
And you should ride
Because
that one to the end.
And I think that just police officers as a whole, if they own their mistakes more and speak out against officers that are the ones that are misbehaving, the ones that I do believe are the minority, and then just approach your communities with like an open heart and kindness and try and make your interactions with people positive instead of negative. Like, I pull people over, and I don't write tickets either because I hate fucking writing tickets.
So no speed traps and no tickets from Greg, all right?
That's not my bag. Everybody knows my bag. They want Officer Anderson there if you're in a shooting or a fight. But that's funny. My coworkers joke about that. But when you pull someone over and you approach them, literally the tone of your voice can change that entire interaction.
Or your posture,
body
language.
All of that. And that doesn't mean that you're conceding to them or you're not ready or like all the tough guy talk. It's like, no, you give people respect until they give you a reason not to. And if you're not willing to do that because you're so afraid, you probably don't have the right constitution to be a police officer.
That's a tough thing for people to hear, I think, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's a true statement. And I tell you what, from my side of the coin, being a civilian, I don't expect police to be perfect because we're talking about human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's going to be bad shoots. And because I know that, I don't judge the entire profession of the anomaly.
Yeah.
I get very weary when people will point at one incident and say, because of this, all of that. Because it's not, I mean, there's going to be bad shoots. There's going to be bad arrests. There's going to be criminals who have a badge. I expect that. I don't want that to happen, but I know we're dealing with human beings and we're fucking retards at the end of the day.
Yep.
I actually don't think you can say that word, but I'm not going to go back and edit it because we're so imperfect. But if you can find it in yourself, and I'm not saying those things are justified because you feel that way, but if you can find it in yourself to think of that other person as a human being,
Yep.
instead of just some autonomous robot, it'll give you a little bit more understanding.
Absolutely, man. And I mean, that applied overseas too, because as we both know, they were subhuman pieces of vermin. Like, you shoot a dude and your heart rate wouldn't even raise because
The things I saw people do over there, the things I have seen human beings do to other human beings exceeds my vocabulary and my ability to describe them. I don't, and that's just the act. I can't even begin to describe the motivation or the belief or the value system that drove towards. I'm just like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, like you're in a fucking simulation or something.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
You know, the last thing I'll say about cops is everybody thinks that they're on a fucking, like a Navy SEAL level of shooting and moving and communicating.
You know who's not often on a Navy SEAL level of shooting? Navy SEAls.
Navy SEAls.
You go through peaks and valleys.
But dude, literally, I would say literally, like one day at a shoot house where your squad runs through the shoot house, I don't know, fucking 120 times. Just first squad go, second squad, and just rotate through. I bet in one day in a live fire shoot house, you probably get more rounds on target than you do in an entire career as a police officer.
I've heard that, the number of training rounds or training opportunities.
Yeah.
We're talking about, again, defensive tactics for an organization that kind of by definition and design is going to interface at a very close tactile hands-on level. It's baffling to me.
It's absolute insanity. And it shouldn't surprise anyone when cops have bad shoots or bad uses of force, because how can you train 2 days a year
Yeah.
and then expect to maintain any kind of proficiency?
And
can't.
having said that, at the apex of JSOC communities, there's bad shoots.
Yep, exactly.
And there's bad use of force.
And
Because
those
again,
are dudes shooting 3 days a week or whatever, you know?
7 days a week.
Yeah.
I remember when I was at the command, I could have 1,000 rounds of every type of ammo in my cage, 24/7 access to my guns in the range. I could go blast as much as I wanted to. And we're talking about human beings. And so there's going to be errors, and there's going to be, I describe selection processes. There's weeds in every lawn, regardless of how awesome
yeah.
your selection process
Yeah.
is. There's the sociopath that's going to navigate his way through, and you'd be like, "Oh, that guy's awesome. He did what?"
Yeah.
It's so. Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah.
The video. Would you have changed anything about how you did it?
Nope. I wouldn't have changed a damn thing. And again, I'm falling back on the fact that I've had so many opportunities presented to me that I believe the result of that video is going to lead to good things in my life. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now, you know?
Yeah, I'm glad you are. Thank you for making the trip out.
And it's fucking awesome that just, hey, you just made a new friend and you're traveling and you're talking to however many millions of people that are going to listen to this.
7 or 8 people.
But no, it's cool, man. It's I'm just seeing a lot of doors opening up, and maybe it was just the right timing for this to happen in my life, you know?
Yeah, I don't think I'm a believer of, things happen for a reason either, but I do think opportunities present themselves, and even more so if you're in the right headspace to recognize it. Because I've certainly recognized some after the opportunity has passed. I'm like,
yeah, I should've.
I messed that up.
It was funny too, because when the commander called me and I was talking to my wife, we were driving, and I said, I can't take that video down. And she looks at me and she's like, I know where this goes. And I was like, yep, you know where it goes.
What are her thoughts on it?
She knows that I'm crazy. Like, she's been through a pretty wild ride with me as far as like contracting and the Marshal Service and stuff. She supports me, and she's happy that I stand by my convictions, but it's also exhausting to her sometimes. Because
well, it's going to be exhausting to you at times too.
Yeah, she knows that I'll change my entire life on a moment's notice on principle, you know? And that's just something that was ingrained in me from as a kid. My dad was big into that too, so.
Yeah. My dad was also very firm on standing your ground. And he would always, and still has always had my back when I stand my ground on my convictions. I mean, my parents set my moral compass for me very well. And then I just got incredibly lucky to be around a community of men that helped refine that true north for me.
Yeah.
Because I feel that way as well. Like there's certain things that I'm like, oh, whatever, this is irritating. I'm not gonna make my line in the sand. But there's some topics where it's like, no, we're not gonna cross this line, and I'll die on that hill too.
And if you don't have some of those lines drawn in the sand as a man, or as a human being, I should say,
yeah,
you should probably go look in the mirror, because you need those.
Or do a little bit of a reflection on how much you're paying attention, or how well do you actually know yourself, or gauge the depth of your convictions and your beliefs. But I think that's maybe one benefit from our previous career is, you're getting on airplanes to go over to countries that you could have avoided for the rest of your life willingly, but you're voluntarily going over there multiple times on a rotation cycle because you want to go there, because I don't want my kids to ever have to walk in the sand that I did, and I don't want your kids to, or anybody else's kids to. But you got plenty of time on the way there and on the way back and on helicopters and on vehicles to consider your depth of conviction on your beliefs. And that, for me, has stuck with me well beyond that occupation.
No, 100%, man. I remember some of those. And not only flying off of the objective, but flying into it, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, they're not sure if they have anti-aircraft or whatever, and you're like, hey, this is probably it. I got 10 minutes left on this world, and I'm just stuck in my own thoughts. So who are you happy with who you are, you know?
It's a tough place to be, to take an objective look at yourself like that. I oftentimes would find that I fell short in many areas.
Dude, don't we all, right?
Oh, fuck.
But that's part of the process is the first step is being able to have that look, seeing your deficiencies, and then what's next to work on those deficiencies.
Yeah.
You know?
How have you talked about this with your kids?
I've been 100% open and honest with them.
How old are they? Probably should ask that first.
They're 5, 8, and 11.
Okay.
So the 8 and the 11-year-old.
Varying degrees of understanding what's happening.
The 8 and the 11-year-old kind of understand it. It's funny. My 8-year-old's like, well, what are you going to do now if you're not a cop? And I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? She's like, that's the only job you'd ever be good at.
I love / hate the things that come out of kids' mouths.
I know, it's just brutal honesty.
You don't know a goddamn thing, but you were also 100% correct, and it cut me to the bone.
Yeah, just that brutal honesty. You know?
Yeah.
It's hilarious sometimes.
It's an amazing opportunity you have to reinforce to them right now the value of integrity and holding the ground of your convictions.
And I'm hopeful that they'll look back on this period and be like, yeah, my dad did what he believed was right, you know? And that's like what I'm preaching to everybody that'll listen to me. It's like, I'm not here to necessarily say what the right path is.
Yeah.
Because who the fuck am I? I'm just some punk from 2nd Ranger Battalion. But if you look inside yourself, most people, I feel like, can come to terms with what is right versus what is wrong.
I often think that people don't have any question as to whether or not, you know what I mean? Like, I think we come out of the box with an inherent understanding. I think people choose to find a way to either ignore it or explain it away because it's more convenient. No,
you're absolutely right.
Because, I mean, to me, there's very few things where you could say, okay, A or B, right or wrong, and lay out a standard. I'm like, no, that's wrong. You know, there might be some gray area in there, but at the end of the day, like the concepts, they're pretty crystal clear to me.
Well, I mean, and that's literally a lesson that's taught to you in basic training in the Army. It's like
not in the Navy. They teach you how to march and like
the leadership acronym in the Army. You know, what is it? Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage.
Listen, that's far too much.
I can't believe I fucking was able to pull that out of my ass.
I believe the Navy on the walls, it said honor, courage, and commitment, which, you know what, that looks great on a Hallmark card, and it doesn't mean shit unless you live it.
But if you preach that to 18-year-old kids that are just starting to come into manhood and make them think about that and make them analyze that, that's the first step, you know?
Yeah.
And it's going to be up to the individual if they toss that out.
And hopefully that's not the first time they've heard it. Like I look back at my own parents. My dad was a masonry contractor. I grew up around some pretty interesting work environments of hard men working hard, and he would tell me to do something, he expected it. When I told him I was going to do something, he expected me to live up to some of those words. You know, first time of hearing honor, courage, and commitment, like it wasn't when I got to boot camp. It was a good reinforcement, and it was a different optic to view the world because, again, you know, organized sports is another great example. Everything you learned in Army basic training, absent the firearm type stuff, you actually learn a lot of those lessons in organized sports, which is another reason I think, like, get your kids out into sports, bending themselves, dealing with things that are difficult because you'll learn those lessons. And absent that, then the military hopefully is a great launching point, but they'll get farther if it's a reinforcement as opposed to an initial lesson.
For sure. It's funny you say that because I don't think a lot of people make that connection between sports and service. And like
the lessons are almost identical.
So I wrestled and did track like as a kid through middle school and as a freshman. And then I got caught up. I found girls and alcohol.
Yep.
And just
it's classic pairing, really.
Yeah, completely let all of that shit, like I threw it out the window. You know.
What was your favorite booze in high school?
Well, dude, I was from Snohomish, Washington, so we just drank Schmidt Ice.
I was going to say, or like Old E.
Yeah. But like to this day, I regret the fact that I walked away from athletics because once I got into the Ranger Regiment, I saw that the dudes that took sports very seriously, they had an edge on the guys that didn't.
Well, they were just changing one uniform for another.
Yeah. So I had
in concept.
Yeah, and I felt that, and I saw that I had to play catch up to get to where those guys were at, you know?
If you think about it, on a football team, and I'm my mother wouldn't let me play football because she thought it was too dangerous.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, yeah, roger that. Checkmate.
Yeah.
And but I mean, think about it. There's a variety of positions. Some of them get the limelight, others don't. They all have to work together. There's a potential value on one position over the other, but service above yourself, hard work, integrity. Like, you got what you need to do on the play. Like, the play is not going to be successful unless you get all those lessons that you get into buds, and it's the same thing. It's like, this is your swim buddy. You have to care more about him than you do yourself, which is a reinforcement of a concept. They just have different reinforcing tools in buds than they did in high school, but it's all the same stuff.
And then just also learning to work with a bunch of different personalities.
That's one that's tough to explain to people. They think that the SEAL teams, there's this utopia of one type of person.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I served with, and I'm sure you had exactly the same experience, every belief structure that I think is possible, from religious belief. I served with a guy who was still a virgin in his mid-30s. He was raised by missionaries. Like, his parents were missionaries. Savage. Loved jiu-jitsu. All he wanted to do was just murder people. That's the only thing he was trying to...
I've seen those guys too.
Yeah,
we're killing for the Lord.
Oh, for sure. We're either gonna outbreed him or outshoot him. And but then there was the functioning alcoholics. There were people who they joined the military because they wanted to escape an economic system. Other people wanted to come in. Originally, they thought, I want the educational benefits. Guys who literally went to Ivy League schools were like, fuck this shit. I'm not even going to go become an officer. I'm a graduate of Wharton's Business School.
Yeah, I want to be a shooter.
E2. Let's go party and do this. He's like going through buds at 27. I'm like, well, how do you know all these things? But
it's bizarre, man.
And I never had a team that was full of people that all liked each other.
Nope.
There was always a personal or professional conflict. There was always a belief structure conflict. Let's just say that alcohol was a part of our working environment, and there was always one or two guys that would not participate because they just didn't want to drink. So it was never just everybody all on board heading in the same direction. So you learn how to communicate, to work with, physically, mentally, and manage all of that stuff.
I don't think people have any idea of how rampant alcoholism is.
Dude,
in the special operations community.
When I joined, I don't think you could get advanced to E7 until you at least had one DUI. I mean, it was keggers on Friday.
Yep.
There was booze everywhere. And then now the fastest way out of the SEAL teams is an alcohol-related incident.
Oh, really?
Oh, they will eject you so fast. And I think it was just a whole paradigm shift inside of the military. But, yeah, I mean, think about it. The communities, they work hard and they play hard.
Yep.
But I tell you what, for better or worse, I'm not abdicating the use of alcohol, but in those environments and the off times as well, the camaraderie that was built during those times,
of course,
it's hard to describe how tightly it bonded. Would it have been the same without alcohol?
Nope.
I don't think so.
I'm going to say nope.
Yeah,
on that one.
I'm going to say I don't know because I'm not smart enough, but I'm also going to lean directly towards what you just said. Yeah, it's crazy. And then at the end of the day, you're capable of doing incredible things with a group of people that don't believe the same thing. They are on board with the commander's intent, but at a personal level, they might have a variety of different beliefs.
Yep.
And it's amazing.
No, it's truly incredible to see the machine actually work. Because when you break it down like that, you'd think there's no fucking way.
Yeah.
Well,
and like we were saying on the car over too, it's if people could really see on target, there's moments of greatness and moments of how are we going to get ourselves out of this, guys? Because we suck. We really, really are sucking right now. And let's just go ahead and make something up on the fly.
Yeah, but they can't put those scenes in the movies. That wouldn't be fun to watch.
I'm trying to get a movie made where it's a 72-hour movie and it's all PowerPoint. It's just mission planning and nothing actually happens because at the end of that, the mission gets canceled due to weather.
Yeah, dude.
And I don't think anybody will watch it. But.
There was a scene in Black Hawk Down, and I was in the Ranger Regiment when Black Hawk Down was released. And so they opened up a theater and they gave a private screening to 2nd Battalion.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you know how every movie, all the Hollywood shit, but there was one scene where a guy was trying to bound across a street and he tripped over a rock and went ass over tea kettle.
Yeah,
and
accurate.
His gear was fucking flopping all over the place and he dropped his shit and I was like, that's the most realistic portrayal of a Ranger you'll ever see.
Indeed. Just a yard sale of shit everywhere, and then you're trying to pick stuff up, and you're like, yeah, fuck it. Oh, yeah. There's occasionally I have a buddy of mine named Brian Callen, and we will sit down and I'll play movies for him. And he knows nothing about tactics, but I'm going to try to get him a job as like a JSOC consultant because the ideas he has are truly revelatory if you can wrap your head around the fact he doesn't know anything about tactics. But I'd like once a quarter I sit down and we just watch movies. I call it Tactical Asshole.
I just heard him talking about that on the Joe Rogan podcast, but I haven't seen any of them yet. I'm sure they're fucking hilarious.
I've only done 2. I have another one in the can already. Mostly we were watching Steven Seagal Lawman, though, and just making fun of that pontificating asshat. And no, he's the best. He's the best, man. Shit, we've been at it for almost 3 hours. I'll let you close, man. What do you want to close with? I mean, it's I can't thank you enough for taking the time to make the travel out here.
No, this was fun, man. Like I was happy to come out here and shoot the shit with you. I guess, I mean, I already kind of beat a dead horse on where I stand with cops and following their heart and listening to their intuition and all that. I guess I'll leave it with the amount of support that we've got from people has been fucking incredible. Like, not only like from the GoFundMe, everybody's been rallying and sending money to my family, which I never in 1,000 years imagined would happen. But just all the emails, people are sharing their story with me. And I'll tell you, like I said, there's probably tens of thousands. I haven't even been able to begin to get into those emails.
Yeah,
but the ones that I have seen is people sharing their thoughts and their stories and talking about how they support me and how they think that message was needed to be heard. And it's just cool to see like something as small as pointing your phone at you for 8 minutes turning into something that is garnishing support from millions and millions of people. So I'm really appreciative of that. I just want to say thank you to anybody that's in my corner that's listening.
Let's circle back up again in like 12 months and do it again.
I'm down, man.
Just as like a recap to see what has happened. Give it a year to, because I mean we'll be out of the. Well, fuck, we better be out of.
Yeah,
the
we better be out of it.
We'll be into the COVID-20 pandemic, which is going to be very different than the COVID-19 one, but it should give you a chance to figure out where North is going to point for you, and then.
Yeah, I look forward to it, man. I'll bring my gi next time too.
Only if we're out of the pandemic. Right on, man. Thank you.
All right.